Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Committee of the Whole meeting for the Thompson-Nicola Regional District for Friday, April 17th, 2026. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today we are located in Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc, and we respect the land and territory on which we gather today. Just to note that we have three alternate directors with us today. We don't quite have alternate director Nancy Beppel here yet for Director O'Reilly. We have alternate director McCann here for Director O'Connor, and we have alternate director Kershaw here for Director Hayward. Director O'Toole is unable to be with us today, as is his alternate. Also like to acknowledge that it is Director Newstater's birthday today. I understand she is 29, so congratulations, Director Newstater, on reaching the age of 29 again. Yeah. And thank you to everyone who has inquired about how the opening night of Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe went last night in Ashcroft. It was awesome. I made it back in plenty of time, so thank you. And I just want to say that the best part of it was, well, we had a fantastic sold-out audience. They applauded everything, and several of the children who are playing major roles in this production, it was their very first time on stage. Despite their confidence, there were nerves, and you could see them backstage floating higher and higher as they realized how the audience was responding to what they were a part of. And there was fist pumping. You could just see them inflating, and it was awesome. And that's one of the reasons why I am just so happy to be a part of amateur theater in my community, because it is so great for kids to have that opportunity to grow their confidence and their abilities and their skills. And thank you to the audience, and thank you to all of you for asking. It really means a lot to me as well. So moving on, we have the minutes of the February 13th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you very much. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. We move right on into our delegations, and our first delegation is from former Ashcroft resident, Superintendent Jeff Pelly, who's here to provide an overview on resources, rural resource increases and provincial funding, crime trends, localized drug conflict, and rural strategies. Welcome, Superintendent Pelly.
Thank you, Madam Director, council members, mayors. It's a pleasure to be here. As you are aware, I'm the officer in charge of Kamloops and Tk'emlúps detachment, so that serves proportionally into the rural communities and the areas. So that would lead halfway up to Barrier, out to Pritchard, as well as out to on Highway 1 to Big Sky. So that would be our rural jurisdiction in addition to the city of Kamloops. So with that opportunity here, I'd like to present a full report with regards to our annual outcomes with the demonstrations and our strategic data that has markedly reduced our violent property crime and repeat offenders, although there's much work to do. So moving ahead, there's just statistics with regards to our rural area, but also our city area. And I want to be clear that crime, there's no specific border here that where criminals draw a line on committing offenses in our community, whether it's Kamloops to Tk'emlúps, out to Barrier, Ashcroft, Chase, so on and so forth. I'll open it up to questions at the end here, but moving ahead, our Tk'emlúps detachment is a complement of 14 officers. We have 4 Indigenous Policing Service officers and 11 13 or 11 core policing members, and we are currently operating at close to a full complement with that detachment. So they work hand in hand with their strategies, very closely with the city of Kamloops and how we move forward. So that being said, our strategies, we do focus on a strategic plan within our annual performance plan, and we have had measurable gains. And as I want to, this is first with the yearly comparisons of our city of Kamloops, and then we will compare into our Tk'emlúps rural area. So With respect to our city of Kamloops, we've had some substantial reductions in our break and enter to residences and our businesses, as some of these high-risk offenders are multi-jurisdictional into our rural area. So we've had a substantial reduction of 24% in our break and enter to businesses and 6% into our break and enter to residences. But we've had a substantial amount of theft from motor vehicles that have increased, as well as we've had a gain with respect to our theft of motor vehicles, because some of these vehicles are used as a conveyance into both our rural communities, our smaller communities, and communities that may not have 24-hour policing. We do have a crime reduction unit that has grown within the city of Kamloops, and it has a complement that focuses on these repeat offenders that are multi-jurisdictional and serving us well throughout the community. Leading into our rural communities, we've had a substantial decrease in several areas. Our break and enters to businesses within rural has decreased 39% over the year. Our residents is 50%. There's a direct correlation to some of these high-risk offenders, prolific offenders, or revoy offenders that are multi-jurisdictional and enter into the city or back into the rural communities. So it's very paramount that we intelligence share with respect to that. As you can see here, these are the trending graphs of some of the areas with regards to the city of Kamloops, and then moving into our rural detachment. So that being said, we have a number of units within our city detachment that the Kamloops rural does not have. However, we do benefit focusing on those offenders, and that's where I would like to continue to focus. So we've made considerable progress with respect to our repeat offenders, and basically our team has recovered 31 stolen vehicles in 2025, 19 of which were occupied and led to an arrest. So that's a dramatic impact with these multi-jurisdictional offenders. Amongst those individuals arrested, 12 were designated repeat violent offender and intervention initiative. And basically that is our Revoy program, and that's where we work very closely with our community stakeholders, our probation, our Crown, and we really focus on the highest risk offenders. And as there's a disproportionate amount of crime where certain offenders are responsible for certain crime trends. Into our rural community, if one or two offenders are focused on incarcerated, you may see a substantial drop of 10-15%. Given the types of calls, the call volumes, whereas in the types of call volumes that we have in this city jurisdiction, where it may be less of an impact, but it is still a substantial impact as well. So meeting with our prolific offender data, that 3 out of our prolific offenders as of last month were 3 out of our 13 prolific offenders were in custody, 10 out of our 18 revoy offenders were in custody. And as since of February, and it fluctuates. So when an offender actually goes into custody for a long term, we just don't sit there and state this many are in custody, and we not focus on new replacements or new individuals coming to town. So we're very focused on that intelligence-based policing, sharing with our rural communities offenders that try to be multi-jurisdictional and bounce around from community to community. So it's very paramount that we share that information, and we focus on them, whether it's an offender that came from Kamloops into Ashcroft or Barrier or vice versa. So this is our Kamloops rural property crime trends, as well as our break and enters and our theft from motor vehicles. So as you can see, there is a direct correlation in the increasing trend in the shoplifting and lesser thefts, not only in the rural area, but the city of Kamloops. And we continue to focus on those offenders and the impacts throughout some of our business corridors. And we will continue to focus on them, but we do have reducing trends in the other crimes surrounding break and enters to businesses and residents. Overall, this just allows me to kind of give a picture not only of the Kamloops statistics on our persons crimes and property crimes as a whole before data mining into specific offenses, but it shows the increases and reductions. So these are actual flagged criminal cases in the city of Kamloops where we've had some increases with regards to our persons offenses and our property crime offenses. And it's very important to understand as I demonstrate the rural percentages here, where we have an increase and a decrease or a double decrease or vice versa, that these multi-jurisdictional offenders, we don't stop on focusing on them just because they're on the outer perimeter of the city of Kamloops into the rural area. Our Kamloops detachment is very connected with respect to our teams on all these programs and within all our units on how we can focus on those offenders responsible. Leading into our one specific unit that impacts is our target enforcement unit. We advanced several complex investigations that supported major prosecutions and contributed to a measurable reduction in violence linked to organized crime in the Kamloops and Tecumseh area. We finalized disclosure packages for 2 major shootings associated with the gang conflict within the city of Kamloops that trickles out into our area. We also have completed a disclosure of a large gun manufacturing location and individual that we've recommended charges on that was embedded into our rural community, actually outside our jurisdiction, outside the Tecumseh jurisdiction, but was believed to be responsible for supplying firearms into Kamloops and the Kamloops rural area. So that continues to be able to advance. Our unit was able to strengthen its technical capacity and advance training with regards to these types of investigations. We've had a number of projects with respect to that. Our project E-Normal resulted in the seizure of these firearms suppressors and manufacturing equipment and digital evidence. That's going to have a substantial impact into our Tecumseh rural area, our communities around the area, as well as the city of Kamloops. We've supported additional major projects and prosecutions including Project E-Pandering, that is scheduled for trial, which is underway this year, and our Project E-Paralysis, which resulted in dozens of drug trafficking charges throughout the communities and into both areas. We continue our partnership with Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit. I know I say a lot of acronyms, but that was what we refer to as the CFSEU. And it remains central to some of our success. We had intelligence development. We focused on high-risk offenders, and we had multiple deployments with those teams. We're in the progress of enhancing our training with the Crime Reduction Unit and our frontline officers with CFSEU so that we can continue that at a local level, not just in addition when they attend our city. So several of our major files progressed through the courts. Matters involving drug trafficking, firearms offenses, and organized crime continued toward trial, and some of them are starting to enter the sentencing phase. We continue to focus on enhancing our resources. So with respect to it, 2 years ago, we have in the rural area increased a provincial resource with respect to Kamloops detachment, while last year we increased the municipality with 5 resources, and those resources were deployed into specialized units so that we could be more progressive on our enforcement, not only in the municipality of Kamloops, but into the rural area for multi-jurisdictional offenders who like to go into those areas where they feel that there's less of a police pressure. As you can see, with respect to this, our crimes against persons was a -4%, and these are showing the trends that are trending up and down over the various 3 years in the city of Kamloops, but our Tecumseh had a -19% with respect to that, transitioning from 198 persons crimes down to 160. And these are reported offenses with it. So this is where we're very key and focused on with respect to where these offenders are and what type of offenses. And some of these are reactive as well as some are proactive. So where I'll have an opportunity to speak to that as I move ahead. Our persons offenses, it's a breakdown of the city offenses. We did have an increase in our sex offenses with regards to some of the predatory acts and online where they're becoming more complex. We have a sex crimes unit. And again, some of these individuals are multi-jurisdictional. So we are fortunate for the specialty of the sex crime unit. The final quarter of 2025 represented most operationally intensive period of the year. We received 100 ICE files, which is the Integrated Child Exploitation files that were from our division, and it was a substantial increase from the previous year. Many of these required action, subscriber information, and search warrants and digital evidence seizures. So these are complex investigations, and basically with respect to that, large volumes of these child sex abuse material and increasingly sophisticated offender methods, including encrypted platforms and cross-border digital evidence. So these require our experts to really focus on these, and we work very closely with our Kamloops detachment, where they have specifically a GD core policing aspect of it, and we need to support them on these offenders that are go back and forth from the jurisdictions, or they may be into other communities as well. So this here demonstrates, going into our Kamloops rural, that we've had a reduction in our common assaults, but if you look at our sexual assaults and our more serious offenses, there's actually a 50% reduction. You'll see not applicables in areas. It doesn't mean that they're not applicable. It's just showing that the number has not exceeded a higher margin, where the one or two offenses could substantially increase it 40, 50% in some offenses, or reduce it. So we really want to look at with respect to that. And key to this is it's not just about driving the metrics down. It's the offenders that are responsible, whether it's a one-time offense or multiple offenses, and we continue to focus on them. So to give you some context with regards to the types of files and the file loads, our city of Kamloops, we've had a 1% increase over the last year, although previous years we had drops. And some of that pertains to the decriminalization, as well as Controlled Drugs and Substance Act for simple possession. So we did have a drop when there was the legalization of it up to the 2.5 grams, and then it of course increases when it was criminalized again. So we have had an increase, but Kamloops general duty, as our frontline uniform officers in the city, have had taken over 35,000 files last year, and the detachment was just under 40,000 files as a whole. But reaching into just went a little bit too far here. Reaching into our rural detachment, that we've actually had I got to jump back here. We've had a significant amount of impact, and if you can think of it, on the 10 officers over at rural in the core policing side of things, they've taken more than 3,600 investigations or calls for service in that rural area throughout the jurisdiction. And this is where they're the primary on it. They've had a 2% reduction. However, with respect to that some of the impacts of that can deal with, depends on the types of calls of service and whether or not these offenders are multi-jurisdictional, or where the actual offense occurs. So you could have a primary offense occur in the city of Kamloops and then a series into rural, or vice versa, and we still have to investigate those collaboratively to get the best investigation forward. But the original offense where it occurred is actually the jurisdiction that takes conduct of that file. Kamloops and Kamloops rural are independent detachments, but they are under what we call the same prime VEJR, which is our police records information management environment. So with respect to that, it's a completely different VEJR for the other areas, and our files overlap, where we have distinct business rules with respect to ownership of investigations and how those proceed. Forensic identification section is composed of 6 forensic specialists. 4 of those are municipal, 2 of those are provincial. They provide a service throughout the region, which would actually be up to including our Barrier, our Ashcrofts, our Chase, and out to our Merritt and Kamloops. So that's an integrated unit that is embedded in the Kamloops municipality, and it shares that service delivery. This is an outline of some of the serious offenses, right down to stolen autos, where they examine forensically and really impact us. So we've had a reduction, but we did have 1 vacancy at one time. Unfortunately, in last year, we did lose one of our dear members of our forensic team. So that being said, we have been fully staffed now, and we continue to be progressive, and we have 1 apprentice that's within that unit, as well as it takes a number of years for them to become qualified as a forensic specialist. This just shows you how many fingerprints, our fingerprint identifications, partials. While they are statistics, some of these do not do it justice in the amount of time and the actual work that it takes for our forensic specialists to engage. And they support from general duty investigations to our serious crime investigations, right up to our target enforcement unit and crime reduction unit across the board. Community policing and outreach. We're fortunate that we have a very comprehensive community policing team in the municipality of Kamloops. They're engaged with some of the volunteers in the rural area, as well as educating them on areas involving from speed watch to cell phone operations and cell phones checked, vehicles checked. So they're in the progress of training of how they can further support in the rural area, and where our highest areas are that are integrated between rural and the city of Kamloops, where we can do some community policing with respect to that. Like I say, the offenders are multi-jurisdictional, so if it's in a data crime area, that we can be progressive on the prevention while we have parallel enforcements. That's what we're going to do. I did want to speak just a little bit about the difference of our Kamloops missing persons and our Kamloops missing persons with respect to it. These are very comprehensive investigations that take a lot of time finding individuals when they are reported missing, or it's compassionate to locate because they can't find a loved one, a family member, or they're concerned about someone's well-being. And while I have the stats for the city of Kamloops missing persons, and we've had increase from 391 to 439. We do have a localized missing person coordinator at the detachment level, as well as at the district level. And our general duty uniform officers at Kamloops Rural feed into that when we have a missing person file. So it has the appropriate oversight and engagement, especially if it becomes an investigation that becomes protracted. With respect to our missing persons, we've had a substantial reduction from the rural area, from 22 down to 8 by the year end. And some of these are our investigations, but some of them are repeated individuals. So we're trying to look at mechanisms to work with families and individuals of, instead of them being repeatedly missing over various different periods, of how we can engage and ensure that they're not repeatedly reported missing and prevent that from occurring. So, and this isn't there's no direct correlation here of people from the rural area moving to the city and vice versa in these areas. It's the nature of these reports and how we can be progressive with it. So it demonstrates that these are very substantial and time consuming for a rural officer on the front line that may need that special unit support. Even a missing person, it could be a search and rescue activation too, right? It could be a lost hiker. It could be, for example, we had an individual injured the other day that had crashed on their motorcycle, and that required a search and rescue deployment as well as our officers. So. Moving ahead with our City of Kamloops on the violence relationships, we have an intimate partner violent coordinator. They look at all rural and all municipal files. IPV files continue to grow. However, we do look at those trends. We do have a integrated case assessment team for the high-risk investigations. Leading from our rural, there has been a reduction from 105 files to 69, and that's where they've been focusing on key issues with respect to repeated intimate partner violence calls for service, and how we can manage those, and not only from the investigation that lead to charges, but also trauma-informed approaches with respect to our victims, and addressing, compliance of bail conditions, or if there are charges laid. So a substantial increase in this area, but the number of charge files is on point within our Tk'emlúps rural region. Mental health, as everyone knows, we do have the integrated crisis response team. Our integrated crisis response team right now serves the, formerly known as CAR 40, serves the municipality of Kamloops. As you can see, we're on point for around the same amount of files. When we first imposed the ICRT team, that it was 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And it continues to be a success in the city of Kamloops. Is there a need for it into our rural area? Yes, there is. We've been repeatedly seeking funding with respect to that into the provincial area, with the support of the municipality, as well as our Indigenous leadership, as there's a great impact in there. And a business case has gone forward with respect to that. And we are continuing to have great success with forward momentum to try and ascertain an ICRT resource and expand that service into the rural area. That's our ultimate goal. And we're not there yet, but we are looking at expanding that service and seeing how we can get appropriate funding through the provincial government. So this is for obviously high-risk calls of individuals in crisis, completely separate from proactive outreach within the communities. Working with our road safety. So we do have a municipal traffic unit, and our municipal traffic unit provides mainly service to the city of Kamloops. There is a BC Highway Patrol unit that polices the main highways through all our communities. And then we have the Tk'emlúps Rural that does not have a designated municipal traffic unit. However, those uniform officers do focus on with respect to what enforcement they can do in those areas in between calls for service. And they're very progressive on that front. Our municipal traffic unit obviously enforces throughout the corridor and responds to collisions as well. If there is a fatal collision within the rural area, that actually the rural community or detachment would respond to those prior to our municipal traffic services. We may be providing support with respect to that. And then in addition, there is analytical or collision reconstructionists that are deployed depending on the nature of it and the severity of it. But as you can see with our strategic plan on the municipal traffic side, the impaired driving and criminal codes, it has a substantial increase. However, we've been complementing our road safety, not only with our municipal traffic, with a few reserve constables as well that are continued to be deployed in that to create a greater presence in the community, as well as more visibility on the roads with respect to that, because we all have to travel to and from Kamloops and through the rural areas into our smaller communities. That being said, it's a brief overview of our statistics as well as our priorities, and we continue to move into our strategic priority for the Tk'emlúps Rural Detachment, as well as our city of Kamloops, where we work in partnership very closely on reducing violence and property crime, reducing crimes through strategic intervention and collaboration, as well as a mandated road safety strategic plan. And I now open it up to any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much. We have 4 people so far. You'll notice a trend here in the names and where they're from: Carpuck, Sarai, New Stater, and Middleton. Just a reminder that we're not down at the Horseshoe here. So So Director Karpak, you're going to kick us off here.
I can't help you with that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Pelly, for your presentation, and all your members and the work that they do in our communities. My question has to do with something that we're probably going to see a little bit more of in discussion this morning, and that has to do with fires and emergency events. And your members are often very much involved, as we are expecting this to be a potentially dry fire season. I'm sure we're going to hear more with the next delegation, but I'm curious, what does that do to your membership's ability to deal with other issues? And my second follow-up question is, during these events, we often, or I have heard stories of people saying, you know, my place got ransacked. We were told to evacuate. People come in through back roads. And your thoughts on how we can help secure communities and how communities can help secure after they have these forced evacuations. So two parts to that, if I could.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Karpak. Very complex, layered question with respect to wildfires. If it leads to a working hand in hand with EMBC within our pre-ocs, whether it's the regional district or the city, we do have a strategic approach with respect to that. Our resources, not only at city, support rural and vice versa. We have district resources, and that would depend on the nature of the event, the direction, and what's actually occurring. That being said, as if we were to lead into a region involving evacuations, we are at the forefront with our partners, whether it's BC Wildfire, the regional district, and with the local pre-oc here. And those areas, we would not only be strategic in how we evacuate, but we also look to ensure the safety of those homes and property, and we look at security plans with respect to that, and that works closely within the EOCs. If we have an area that's being evacuated, we do have certain checkpoints, we do have certain roving patrols, and then if individual, into your next question, that has been, if their place has been ransacked, that's a criminal offense. We would investigate that accordingly and have an investigative team respond to those. It's very paramount, coming from previously in Williams Lake, where we actually evacuated the city of Williams Lake. We're very progressive on our investigative teams and those offenders that try to prey on communities during states of an emergency, and we focus on offenders as well. We try to be proactive on those fronts as well, and we've had some great successes with respect to that in the past. And we can't foreshadow what crimes are going to occur, but we look at the prevention aspect while enhancing public safety and those individuals that are being moved out of these high-risk areas.
Sorry, just a technical question. Did we sort out the issues with that microphone at the podium? Because it's not very, it's sounding as if there is no amplification whatsoever. Director Blackwell online says he can hear you, but his volume is at the maximum.
Is this better? I'm usually a very loud person, so I may have moved it away, but.
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Next, we have Director Sarai.
Thank you, Superintendent Pelly, for that intense report there. I'm curious, and as we've sent something forward to Silga as well, I'm just curious, how far does our highway patrol go to look to enforce safety on our highways, and also working with our commercial vehicle inspectors? Have you noticed an increase on transport truck speeding, collisions, maintenance of trucks, or anything like that that would be concerning to us?
Director Sarai, very good question. Loaded question with respect to the transport trucks. Our municipal traffic works very closely with BC Highway Patrol and our CVSE, and there's been multiple joint force operations throughout the municipality, Kamloops, and on our highways. Within BC Highway Patrol, they are not under our reporting line, but we cross over with respect to reports, and there's a BC Highway Patrol in Kamloops, there's a BC Highway Patrol in Merritt, Ashcroft, and Clearwater. And our municipal traffic teams overlap with them, and each of them have boundaries very similar to detachment that go all over our major highways throughout the province of British Columbia. So I don't have specifically each of their jurisdictions, but we work very closely with them. As for the transport trucks and the increases and noticeably being concerned about the inspections, again, I don't have those statistics in front of me, but I know that we've been very progressive on that front with the joint force operations and our municipal traffic being engaged with them, not only on road checks within our city, but on our main highways throughout the province. And that's something I can bring back for future for statistics wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Newstater.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions for me, if I can. The first, our gratitude, and just want to commend you on the Revoy program, the tremendous amount of work, the Herculean effort really for you and your members to begin targeting prolific and repeat offenders, and also the profound frustration from communities, whether urban or rural, to know that the same person who breaks into their home, which is disturbing enough, is likely to be the same person again. Same thing for businesses or assaults. We see a small number of individuals committing a vast amount of the crime across all jurisdictions into all areas. So we thank you for your work. But when we look at kind of what's clogging up the pipeline of success on the other side of your work, in my opinion, one of the most obvious pinch points and the most easily solvable is when it comes to Crown and the process for them laying charges, as well as the guiding documents that, to me, continue to soften around the edges and make it increasingly challenging for Crown to bring charges against these folks. So to me, one of the lowest hanging fruits still widely available across the province would be for RCMP, who are on the front line, who make these arrests, who know the majority of these offenders by this point, and who have the direct interactions and know the law inside out at this point as well, to be able to directly lay those charges, which would alleviate what we're hearing repeatedly, which is Crown doesn't have enough capacity to get through their files, months of backlog, and again, increasing logistical hurdles to them actually being able to lay the charges or having the will to do so. So my first question is whether the province has had any conversations so far with your detachment about what it could look like to change that process, as many other provinces do to great success. We see it working in the other provinces where this step has been simplified, shall we say, and put into the hands of those who know the files inside out. So curious whether our province has begun to engage with you about that. And then my second question is about CAR 40. Do you already have a letter of support for funding for rural areas from TNRD, or would that be helpful as you seek funding? Because that's a critical service that we also see yielding great success in our community.
Thank you for those questions, Director Newstater. With respect to the charge approval process, there has been no discussion at a detachment level. The police put the best product forward, the evidence forward, to make the recommendation to Crown Counsel. Crown Counsel is the independent body that reviews that charge assessment and would lay the information with respect to when charges are approved and sworn. So I understand there is a different processes with different provinces. However, this is the process within the province of BC. Moving to your second question with CAR 40, we have had letters of support. I do welcome an additional letter of support, and again, we'll continue to move ahead with respect to that. And we've just put that case forward, and I should have a response in short order with regards to it.
So supplemental, if I can, Chair. Oh, I think that was a phone somewhere. Thank you. So in regards to the first, I just really encourage these tables as you go back to your area or to your communities. I do think that a full court press would be helpful as we encourage our province to do the things that need to be done to create safety in our communities. Again, other provinces have the direct charge. Usually, I'm a huge advocate for a third-party independent body, but in this case, it's creating a barrier to success and to safety. So it's certainly something that's worth thinking about collectively, but then also for individual communities. And then second, if I could, Chair, I don't know if this is the best time or most appropriate time for you, but I'd like to put forward a motion that we send a letter of support in the interest of funding being allocated to the TNRD rural areas for CAR 40 support.
So you made that motion, seconded by, was that Director Sarai? Thank you. So we now have a motion on the floor, letter of support regarding car 40 services in the rural area. Any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Director Newstater. All right, next is Director Middleton and then Director Sal.
Thank you. First, I don't know if your report or your presentation can be shared with all of the directors with with an email or a link to that. It doesn't show up right now on our minutes as a report. Is that possible to have that sent out
Absolutely.
to everyone? Perhaps just through Scott or Marnie there. Thank you. I don't know if you want to bring it back up or I could just ask, but on one of your slides and in one of the reports, it was on a lot to do with the Crime Stoppers and the traffic and so forth. But down at the bottom, there was a thing called a garage registration events. What is that?
Thank you, Director Middleton. That is where a 529 garage, where our mountain bikes or bikes can be registered to protect owners with respect to thefts of mountain bikes and how we can get them back with respect to their rightful owner when we do seize mountain bikes. As you know, some of those mountain bikes are $10,000 and very high-end property. So it's an encouraged program that's been local, and it's been very successful with respect to crime prevention as well as assisting with investigations.
Thank you. And just one more, just more of a comment perhaps than a question, but you just referenced search and rescue, KSAR, which assists with the RCMP a lot of times, particularly on missing persons and accidents and stuff, anything that's sort of going on. So just a little shout out to KSAR, and as we have an AAP coming out here for voter support to build a new facility. Just wanting top of mind that this is a really important service as well with the RCMP in our region. So say thank you again for everything that you do and all those that assist you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Director Sal, then Director Getz.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Superintendent Pelly. I just chuckled when I saw Mayor Blackwell and pretty much everybody in the North Thompson jump to attention when you mentioned the BC Highway Patrol, having a base in Clearwater. So from that area, we're under the impression that we still don't have anybody from BC Highway Patrol based out of there. We met with RCMP management at the UBCM last fall, and they gave us the update that yes, it's looking positive that something might restart, but we still have not seen any thing on the ground. So does it sound like you have an update or some further information? Thank you.
Excellent question. BC Highway Patrol does not fall under my reporting line. However, I'm aware that they do have a contingent out of there. I can't give you what that staffing looks like, and I will certainly follow that up with respect so we could jointly address that and get you the information that you need.
Thank you. I'll just add to Director Sal's comment. We nominally have a traffic department out of Ashcroft Detachment. It has been completely unstaffed for a considerable period of time now, and there is considerable concern that this is attrition by, on purpose. That we know we had a report from their detachment commander in Ashcroft a couple of weeks ago at Ashcroft Council that yes, Kamloops Rural does come out along Highway 1 and do the odd patrol, which is awesome. And Merritt, same thing, the odd patrol a couple of times a week, which is great. And anyone who drives that knows that we need way more traffic enforcement than just a car coming out from Kamloops or Merritt once every 2 or 3 days. So just adding my concern that this non-staffing of departments that are nominally still there is very concerning. Next up, I have Director Getz.
Thank you for the presentation. Quick question. I meet with my staff sergeant once a month. We have police committee 4 times a year. And he brings us up to date on some of the things. One of the things that we've noticed in the Merritt area, and I'm not sure if you've seen it here, we had 120 illegal firearm seizures last year, way more than normal. I'm wondering if we're seeing that in the same area, or if that's happening everywhere. The other question that I have is the drug situation. We know that fentanyl and xylazine have been fairly accurate and moving in the last year. Now I see there's a new drug out there called cyclorphin that is now being mixed with the fentanyl. Are we seeing that on the streets here yet? Has it made it here yet? And I'm just wondering, and getting back to the thing with the Crown, we've taken two motions to UBCM with Nikki Sharma, Minister of Justice, for bail reform and for Crown to approve charges. One of the comments that we get back is Crown doesn't want to make criminals out of these people. Well, unfortunately, it's too late. They're already criminals. So we have an issue to the point where we have our RCMP do this due diligence, do the hard work. We get PTEP and IRT in, and all this work gets done. These people get arrested, and they've done horrific stuff, and within 2 days, they're back out on the street because charges aren't being laid. We've got to get to a point where that's got to come to an end, because the citizens of our community are about had it. Right now, I just got off the phone with my staff sergeant. We're seeing 6 to 8 people a day on the FIFA cleanup out of Vancouver coming to our community, being shoved to our community because we have a shelter. Again, that's got to come to an end, and I'll make sure that happens this week, because we are seeing our property crimes in the last 5 days have exploded by almost 70%. These people have nowhere to go, and now they're being shoved out of the city for FIFA. And to me, that's ridiculous, and that's got to kind of stop. So I would suggest other communities that have shelters, keep your eyes open, ask your citizens to start taking pictures of people that are being dropped off, and get it back to who's ever responsible for that, and ask them to stop doing it, because we're seeing it right now.
Thank you, Director Getz. With respect to firearms, yes, we've seen a substantial increase of illegal firearms over the last year. Gun manufacturing was one of our projects with respect to that, where we see just ample amount of firearms. We're seeing more 3D printed firearms, and we do have a series of projects that have been advanced, and I look forward to announcing with respect to charge recommendations on a few of those in due course. So not having the concrete statistics in front of me, but we have seen a number of illegal firearms or unlawfully possessed firearms as well. So with respect to the fentanyl, we continue to monitor that. I have not have those metrics locally with respect to how that's been impacted or where we stand. I'm aware of it, and again, I just don't have that information in front of me. With respect to the individuals, the repeat offenders, we have grown our crime reduction unit specifically to focus on those offenders. That has to do with part of our 5-year strategic plan. In addition to how we manage our prolific offenders and revoy offenders, we do see those repeat offenders being released back onto the street, and or with conditions or without conditions, and we have strategies for pretty much every one of them, and we continue to focus on them. So I do understand what you're saying, and with your officers, there's similarities with the local here, and we're cognizant of these offenders are from Merritt and vice versa, as we've had to support Merritt and Merritt's had to support us as well. So again, I do understand, and the request for bail reform, we're very supportive with respect to the challenges and trying to overcome why these offenders are repeatedly released. And we've extracted segments of from certain offenders just over their life, and we see individuals with 30 and 40 convictions that are repeatedly released into our community, although we've had some success with other offenders, and our officers do get frustrated with it. The growth of our crime reduction unit team, our street enforcement team, and some of the specialized units at the municipal level, in addition to our frontline policing, has been serving us well, and is only one necessary response to it. We still need to focus on why these certain offenders are being repeatedly released. That being led into the FIFA cleanup, as you've labeled it, I am unaware of individuals being brought into our community from the Lower Mainland. We do get new individuals, but not specifically with respect to that I am aware of, and we continue to monitor more of our repeat offenders that go from community to community. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, and we're going to continue to examine that, because if individuals are being brought into this community for just displacement, then it is a concern for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Blackwell.
Yes, thanks. On a follow-up question on the FIFA issue, will there be a contingent from your area of officers seconded to FIFA?
Excellent question, Director Blackwell. I was waiting for that question. So under the Provincial Police Services Agreement, and Article 9 has been issued with respect to that. And yes, we are trying to determine what type of contingent we will be releasing to support the FIFA, or if we'll be more pressed for our local operations. But we will not compromise public safety or service delivery to any of the communities that we provide the service.
Okay, do you have a follow-up, Director Blackwell?
Yeah, just quickly, what I'm hearing on the street, and that's what you take it for whatever, is that all ERT groups will be stationed at FIFA this year, which to me is, if that is correct, is a pretty high concern, considering those are also some of the groups that will be used for wildfire evacuation coordination and things like that. So I'm just going to leave that there. You don't actually have to answer that one, but yeah.
If I may, Director Blackwell, the emergency response team will always have a contingent within the Southeast District throughout Kamloops, Kelowna, and the surrounding areas. Our primary response team will not be deployed to FIFA to compromise localized service. I just want to make that known.
Thank you, Director Newstader.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Director Getz, your first point that you were talking about with the repeat offenders and the Crown Pinch point, that's exactly what I was talking about. So just really encourage you to take that back to your council and to say, this is the most obvious identifiable area where we could make a substantial difference, and also honor the work of the RCMP, who are putting it in day over day, risking their lives to arrest the same people that are infuriating our communities and doing this damage. So strongly encourage you to take that step with your council, and council would be happy to contribute any of our knowledge and what we've done so far and motions that we've made. And then secondarily, what's really challenging about the conversation about people being brought in because of FIFA or sent away because of FIFA and landing in our communities is proving it. It's incredibly difficult, but I will say anecdotally, in Kamloops, we're hearing the exact same thing already. We are hearing from what I believe to be credible sources, like social workers or outreach workers, that we're seeing new people on the street daily who are self-reporting that they have been incentivized to leave the Vancouver area and to come here, or communities like here. So I think it's important that we recognize, first of all, that's not substantiated. We don't have any hard evidence of that, but it's important that our communities talk and know what is happening, because that is a very real concern, I think, for everybody who has any services like Kamloops would, like Merritt does, within our area. And it's something that we hope that people will talk about responsibly, but that we would like to address if we can get concrete evidence as well.
Thank you. I have Directors Lepso and then Grenier.
Thank you very much. Lots of what we're talking about is bail and sentencing reforms. I'm just wondering if you have any comments on the current Bill C-14 that's before the House of Commons at this time.
Yeah, I don't specifically have any comments with respect to it right now while it's in process, so my apologies.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Changing a little bit, how does policing on waterways like Kamloops Lake and the river work?
Excellent question. We do usually try to plan a seasonal patrol with respect to that. We do have a watercraft that we do deploy for investigations in partnership with Kamloops Fire Rescue, and we can expand that into our rural areas. However, at this point, we don't have the plan to deploy that based on the priorities, but we do prevention and aspects with regards to boating prevention, impaired driving with respect to it. But not at a local level. Other smaller detachments may have those opportunities. I know Chase Detachment does those as well, and they're completely separate entity.
And just supplemental to that, so where is the boating unit out of? And the impairment issue is what I often get asked about. You know, there's a bunch of guys out there, they're drunk, they're driving around and, you know, what's gonna,
We do respond to those calls for service, and we do have a boat that we can deploy with respect to that into our areas. And occasionally we do proactive patrols, but we don't have a strong contingent that we do permanent proactive patrols throughout the season. So yes, absolutely, we do have those opportunities here, but we don't have a specific day-to-day patrol like you would your frontline officers.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Director Stanky?
Thank you. I really enjoy these presentations. It creates an awful lot of awareness. But on a small community like ours up in Clinton, we don't seem to have that dialogue with the local RCMP. And I wonder if there is a possibility or an opportunity for them to do a presentation to council to create the awareness. We are getting more and more of the lower mainland refugees, so to speak, to move up in our area. And when they do, they all bring their problems with them. And seeing how Highway 97 dissects the village of Clinton, we get an awful lot of truck traffic. And it would be kind of nice to know these stats. It helps us in our planning. Is there an opportunity for them to do a presentation such as this on a municipal level?
Great question, Director Sankey. Absolutely, there is. You will have a detachment commander. You will have a district advisory NCO. I will reach out and have them engage with you with respect to that, just given the presentation here and how we do our business operations, and see if that's completely plausible. Not under my command, but certainly working in smaller provincial detachments, I know that that is usually a feasible option.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I just have one quick one. I just noticed quickly on the mental health related calls. They remain fairly steady, consistent between 2024 and 25 in terms of number. But between 2024 and 25, the CAR 40 calls went from 2,073 in 2024 to 1,300 in 2025, when the total number of mental health related calls between those 2 years stayed about the same. Is there an explanation for the drop off of 800 calls between the 2 years?
I don't have the specific data in front of me, but we've had a substantial increase when we went from a one-person unit to a two-person unit, and then we kind of stabilized across that. But then also we've had a number of outreach initiatives as well with respect to that. So not just calls in crisis, but there's been support from the outreach workers as well, and the program that the community service officers have in addition to the police service. So that may be a factor with it, but I don't want to speculate. I will specifically drill that down.
Thank you very much. And if there are no other questions or comments, thank you very much, Superintendent Pelly.
Thank you.
Always very interesting to hear from you. Not always happy, but always interesting. All right, and our BC Wildfire Service crew have been waiting very patiently. I hope they found it interesting as well. But I will welcome them to the podium. So according to my notes here, I have Jeffrey Dunn and Nicole Bennett. Is that correct?
That is, yes.
Awesome. So they are from Kamloops Fire Center. Jeffrey is a manager and Nicole is a community engagement specialist. And they are here to talk to us about seasonal preparedness. Thank you very much. And if I could just make sure that you're standing fairly close to the mic, because I don't think it's picking up sound the way it should be.
Okay, so can everyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. I'll try my best to keep as close to the mic as I can. Yeah, so as you said, my name is Jeff Dunn. I've been here a few times, Fire Center Manager, and yeah, looking forward to be able to give you a little presentation today about our seasonal readiness and kind of a recap on last season. Just as we were leaving the office this morning to come out here to present, our first fleet of air tankers came into Kamloops, landed and parked out front of the office, as well as our junior program is out training, running around the fields, pulling hose, and so there's quite the buzz we're seeing around the center at the moment as people get themselves ready for the season ahead. And we've also seen a lot of work happen already in terms of our prescribed fire season. We've been out with numerous communities doing some burning out in the Merritt area and out and around all of our other zones as well. So the green up kind of came a little bit quick, and we didn't get the best opportunity to get all of our projects completed, but there's a hell of a lot of planning done and a lot of good work completed so that we're able to take advantage of this when the fall comes at the end of the season here as well, and get out there and start to get some of these projects completed. So just recapping on last year, pretty quiet for our region, 289 fires for just under 10,000 hectares burnt. Which is definitely a lower number compared to what we've seen in previous years when we're presenting that. So it's a kind of a combination here of weather systems being favorable for us and not as much lightning starts as we've had in the past. The conditions were definitely favorable for a lot of burning throughout the season, but a lot of our lightning came with a lot of moisture as well. So we were able to get around those incidents and get them wrapped up. We also had a lot of availability across the province as well to bring people in and help support those initial stages of the fire. So all things considered, 289 fire starts for less than 10,000 hectares. That's a pretty good success. Just looking at the stats in a little bit more detail, you'll see that 262 of those fires were caught under 5 hectares. Again, back to pretty aggressive attack from the initial attack, the use of our NVIS, our night flying operations to be able to do early detection, members of the public being able to give us increased data through the app, lots of pictures, meaning that we're able to respond a lot faster, a lot more coordination with other fire departments, community groups, just getting that information into the system, being able to get people dispatched out and get them wrapped around these incidents before they get catastrophic. As I said, we also had a lot of favorable weather that helped in this situation. We had long breaks between lightning strikes, so that it meant that we could actually contain, and we didn't have a number of new incidents to kind of challenge our actual resources. So all things considered, pretty solid season for the team last year. As we look into this season, I know there's the usual conversation in the media about doom and gloom of there's not been enough snow, there has been a lot of snow in the Alpine, all the rest of it. We look back on us exiting out of the season last year, and we can see throughout the whole province, it certainly started to dry out as we got into the later stages of the summer. Things started to, in particular into our region here, really getting into that high drought codes, which meant that when fires were taking hold, they were growing bigger and were more difficult to actually get a hold of. So as we transitioned into the winter months, we obviously seen a lot of rain into December, which really helped with these drought codes, and it really helps get some of that moisture back into the ground and start to replenish for the future seasons. So considering what we were seeing going out of the season, this would have been an alarming startup for this year if that was the case. But what we're seeing for the startup for this year is that with a lot of the moisture that we had into December, into the spring here, things have stabilized a lot. One thing to be considered here, though, is that at the valley bottoms, we haven't seen the moisture that we have in the past. We haven't had the snow sit around for as long as it has in the past. So it's something we are certainly looking at. As I said at the start there, we've been challenged with our prescribed fire season this year, that trying to find that optimum window where the snow comes off, the grass is ready and receptive for fire, and it hasn't greened up yet. So as you can see, the hills look beautiful out there right now, nice and green, but we're going to start to see that trending back into into the brown up as we move into further into a spring. This picture doesn't really give us like 100% confidence in what the season's going to look like. As I said, there's definitely some concern around those low elevation areas, and that's really what we want to be looking at in terms of the human-caused fires. Between inside communities, outside people doing burning in their yards, that's where there's going to be some concern in these kind of next few months. As that elevation kind of increases and that snow comes off, we'll be watching it grow up into the alpine areas. But obviously, through a number of the reports that are out so far, we're seeing in some regions, especially down along the Rockies and out into the Kootenays, significant amount of snow is still in the alpines. So in terms of drought and a water resource, it's still available. It's just, for us, it's about looking at what we're seeing right now and what we're going to get into the spring here. So for us, we're really looking out to what May and June brings in terms of precipitation and how long that can hold off, bring into a situation where we see these colors turn from blue to red. Just going to quickly run through where we're at in terms of resources going into the season, and then we'll get on to some questions after that. So this year we're going to have 6 incident management teams. A number of this team have already been out in Australia this year. They spent 5 weeks helping support our colleagues down there. So they've already had a bit of time on the fire, getting used to moving through and learning some other systems, which is really good. We've also seen 30 of our unit crews get ready for the season. So we're onboarding at the moment to bring people back up to speed. We've had some of them come in as early as February, and we'll have more come in May, as well as our new recruit boot camp happening in Merritt at the moment, which will add additional resources back into any of those vacancies. We've got 151 initial attack crews positioned all over the province in those kind of hard to reach locations and pre-positioned depending on the hazard that we see across the province. We have 11 rappel attack crews based out of Salmon Arm, provincial resource, but heavily available to the Kamloops region, especially in our higher alpine areas and those hard access points. We have close to 600 core teams members, so pulling from different ministries across the province to help support our needs as we surge up, bringing their expertise and their backgrounds into the center and into the incidents so that we can actually have additional resource to either rest some of our own team or bring them into critical roles to help with the response and recovery piece. And then right now, between our type 2 and type 3 contracts, we have over 1,200 firefighters available to bring out onto the fire line across the province. And that obviously doesn't include all the different local community groups, the fire departments all around the province as well, that all come in and collaborate when we get into the multi-size incidents that we're all too familiar with. In terms of aviation, as I said, we had some of our air tankers arrive in Kamloops. We have our ones in Penticton already arrived as well, and they'll start to dot themselves into the province as different areas start to get more higher hazard, and we start to bring all of our aircraft back. At the end of them all arriving, there will be 28 fixed wing aircraft across 14 different reloading bases. We have 120 helicopter carriers available to us, making up a multitude of different types of helicopter assets across the province. We also have a number of long-term contracts set up across the province as well that we have access to, which is a guaranteed hours for 7 medium helicopters, 4 intermediate helicopters, 3 rappel machines that are based out in Salmon Arm, 4 heavy lift helicopters, and the 2 para-attack jump ships that are up in the north. As I mentioned, our night vision flying capabilities has increased. We've added an extra fleet to the mix. This is something I talked about a few years ago that we trialed in the Kamloops region, and now we've expanded it out to the rest of the province. It's been very successful. It's not the silver bullet in terms of wildfire response, but it's an extra tool that we have available to us to be able to go out and do those detection flights after the lightning comes through. It's also meant that we can have scheduling and planning in place when crews come back on in the morning and they can get out and they know what they're going to respond to. It's just one of those extra tools that we've added, as well as all the other important pieces about getting that early detection, early information, and talking with the communities about what's happening on the landscape. But as you see, we had 14 detection missions and over 22 recon missions just to kind of fly the area where we had potential for fire over the season, and we'll be continuing to use that over this season as well. Quick recap on our own region here. I won't go through all the details, but I will provide the slide deck for everyone to have a look at. But basically the same resources in terms of firefighters and officers across all of our zones. And then within each of those zones, we have some of those forward attack locations where we'll pre-position staff as and when the hazard dictates, giving us a bit of flexibility regionally to how we position and place people, depending on how that looks. And then we broaden that out across the province as well to make sure that we're utilizing our resources the best way we can and having that aggressive approach to that initial attack. In some of these zones as well, working alongside the local fire departments in that interface area to have resources available on standby to kind of take on target incidents in such of like lightning forecast. We might bring on additional resources to be out patrolling or to be available to move into that space if needed. Usual kind of piece as well is that we can't do this alone. So we bring on a number of heavy equipment operators, local operators that know the landscape. We're currently signing those up at the moment. It's always the big challenge to kind of work through with all the different operators to make sure we got the information we need, but we're always open to bringing those on. And I know there's been a few challenges this year in terms of getting to that state, but we're making sure we're getting the information out to get everyone that's available to do so into the system as best we can. And we also have, as I said, the type 2 and type 3 contracts. We have 2 Indigenous initial response crews within this region, always working with the fire departments. And we have a number of cooperative community wildfire response crews based around this region as well that will stand up as the incidents kind of come towards their communities. Yeah, and then provincially, there's always other options for different community groups and people that want to get involved with it through some of our first aid services, falling services, remote piloted aircraft systems, fire camp services, firefighter health services, large water moving, structural protection, type 2 and type 3 services. So certainly a lot of people have to come to the party to keep our response the way it is. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who's going to go through some of our roles and responsibilities piece, and then she's going to talk about some of the information pieces as well, and then we'll turn it out to questions.
All right. All right. So we'll probably just gloss through this too, because this won't be, for anybody who was here last year, you'll have seen these slides and really just want to spend the time on the question and answer. But a quick look at sort of the fire department and jurisdictions for response. So from the wildfire to the local government fire department side of things, when you're in a fire protection area, obviously that is the responsibility of the local government and the fire department. You can request assistance from BCWS. If you are on Crown land within your fire protection area, voluntary for the local government fire department to go. It is the responsibility of BC Wildfire Service, and there can be compensation if approval is granted by BCWS prior to the dispatch and engagement of the fire department. Wildland fire outside of a fire protection area, again, responsible party is BC Wildfire Service. And again, compensation for fire department involvement is possible, but approval is required prior to engaging in the activity. Non-vegetative fire outside of fire protection area, we're not granting approval for that. We may respond if there is the potential for it to spread onto Crown land. But the big piece, and I'm sure everybody's seen a lot of the like presumptive disease stuff in the news as of late, our crews aren't trained to respond to non-vegetative fires, whether that's a car fire or a dump fire or something else that's on fire that is not wildland vegetation. And not only are they not trained for that, they don't have the proper PPE, so protective equipment, breathing apparatus, all of those things to ensure that they could do it safely. So when you see a wildfire vehicle like on the side of the highway that's kind of watching a vehicle burning but not engaging, that's because it's not safe for them to do so, and we don't want to put our staff at risk. For the evacuation or alerts and orders side of things, this is just the reminder that BCWS will put forward a recommendation for an alert or order if we feel it is appropriate. That doesn't mean that the local jurisdictional authority can't implement their own evacuation alert or order without there being a recommendation from BCWS. But also when we are recommending that evacuation alert or order, we're making a general recommendation for an area, but the hope is that that local government will amend the area to what is most appropriate for your own emergency response planning and evacuation needs, whether that's including like a certain neighborhood or something, because maybe there is a like long-term care facility that has more complex needs as far as evacuating people from the area and you need more time to do that. Those are all of the things that we're looking to the local government, local jurisdictional authority to be factoring into their decision making when they draw that final polygon. And then on the information sharing front, this is kind of really going to bleed into just the general fire info side of things that we'll talk about quickly. But BCWS is the lead organization to be sharing information on wildfire updates, operational tactics, the things that are going on out in the field. When we get requests for emergency support services or evacuation info or structure loss, things like that, we will always defer those to the local jurisdictional authority. EMCR is up there. We've got Andrew behind me who's going to present right after us. So I'll let him kind of talk more to their roles and responsibilities. And then from the local authority side of things, we're really looking, or we'll be directing people to you when it comes to the evacuation alerts, orders, impacts to community, and some of that recovery piece when there is no longer a threat from fire. And so it's okay for, like, we're in a place where we've made a recommendation that an evacuation order is no longer needed because of threat from fire, but it doesn't necessarily mean that an evacuation order needs to come off if there's some recovery pieces and things that need to be put into place before it's safe to bring community back. But once that kind of next phase of response and recovery has been more active, that's where it's not really something that BC Wildfire is going to be the expert on anymore. And so we redirect people to the local authority. We also have the Wildfire Collaborative Partnership Guide. So this will be, I believe it's third year. You can access it on the QR code. I think the slide deck is coming out to everybody as well. So just really encouraging people to take a look at that. Talks about the roles and responsibilities, how you can support during wildfire for people who are interested. It is publicly available to anybody, so anybody is welcome to look it up online and access it. And then wildfire information sources. So this one is really becoming more and more important as AI becomes more frequently utilized. We've already had one instance this year for the Kamloops Fire Center where like an online sort of Facebook news outlet put up an image for a fire just outside of Merritt and attributed it to the BC Wildfire Service. It wasn't our photo. It wasn't a real photo. So we are just really asking people to make sure you're going to the right locations, the right agencies, whether that's BC Wildfire Service or your local government, to get proper information, proper photos. If you're seeing things online or like hearing conversations in your community where your people are questioning the sources or they've seen a photo or something online, please don't hesitate to send that in to the fire center so that we can follow up. We really don't want there to be misinformation out there, especially when it comes to wildfires. it is really scary for people, and we recognize that. And so where people can flag that as something for us to follow up on to verify the validity of it, we are happy to do so and want to be able to make sure we're just really directing people to the right sources. And then on that note, so we do have the wildfire mobile app. Not many changes over the winter from last year coming into this season, some sort of back end functionality stuff. So hopefully it works a little bit more smoothly for people, but it's not going to change the front facing interface at all. Do really just want to ask people to remember to download this. And when you're reporting fires, if you can do it through the app, it allows you to send in photos, which makes a really big difference for our operational staff. It gives us an idea of what you're seeing out there and helps us determine whether or not it's a couple of crews that go or whether or not the air tankers need to be launched at the same time in advance of having boots on the ground. So those photos make a huge difference. And then if anybody is not signed up, we do have the information bulletins again through the fire center. The info bulletin side of things is really more of that, like, hey, we are working on a cultural or prescribed fire project. The KFC spotlight is more educational in nature around what's the day in the life of an IA crew member look like? What's the day in the life of a unit crew member look like? We see human caused online a lot. Human caused actually doesn't mean that a person started it out of like arson or a cigarette. It could be that a power pole fell on the grass and started a fire that way. So it kind of breaks down a little bit more of like the human caused categories and some of the things that might be considered a human caused fire within that. Just a whole host of things. Everybody is welcome to sign up for that as well. So if you're just curious, I would encourage you to do that. You can unsubscribe at any time or just not open the emails that don't sound like they're interesting to you. That's fine too. And then we do have Instagram now. It's not something we're really using for operational information. Also, probably targets more of a specific demographic. So if you're not an active Instagram user, you're not really missing out on operational information or like emergency type updates. And then we are still using YouTube to put out operational updates, but those will also be linked on the individual incident pages as we have videos like that available. And that's it. So we'll turn it over now for questions.
Oops, thank you very much. Human caused, yes. Last year near Ashcroft, fire was actioned that was caused by an osprey dropping a fish on a power line up on Highway 1, 3 kilometers from the river. That was a human caused fire because it involved power lines. The osprey, as far as we know, is still at large. So there we go. I have Directors Getz, Sarai, and Houghton to start us off. Director Getz.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. In Merritt, we're very happy to see the boot camp running. I think we ran 2 crews through last year. It's always nice to see that. Maybe I can get you to touch on something for me. I've asked this question several times before. One of the things that we've noticed this year is we had a cultural burn that got away on us up at Colchana Creek 2 years ago. I think we had one in Lower Nicola, around the Lower Nicola area. When we do a burn in the community, we advertise weeks before we do it. We also have crews on standby to keep it under control. What are the rules for cultural burning? Are there any kind of rules for cultural burning to let us know that it's happening or that it's going to happen? And are there crews there to handle it? Because it seems the cultural burning is still, a lot of people are unaware of what it is. And it seems that they seem to get away a lot. So I'm just curious on how you view or what the rules are for cultural burning, if there are any at all. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so complex one. We're doing a lot with the communities, in particular in Merritt, to partner on some of these projects so that we can actually put a prescribed fire plan together to what that's going to look like and what the parameters are and so on and so forth, where we can then actually support it with our own crews and making sure that we have other targeted pieces in there. So be it adjacent crown land or out onto some ranch land. But it's an evolving piece, and we're starting to look at what that legislation piece needs to be. But the communities have the right to perform cultural burning, and it varies by community and how they're going to do so. we're doing what we can to work with each of these communities to make sure that we're kind of aligning it as best we can so that we have the right prescription in place. So we're not caught off guard when we get a call for smoke. And in most cases where it is being burnt is within the prescription of what we would do if we were to go out and do our work on it as well. So where we can, we're trying to partner and recognize that communities have the right to do their work as well.
Thank you. Director Sarai.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that presentation. One of the things I just want to share an opinion and have a question at the end. A lot of our residents and neighboring communities, we are strictly all by ourselves when a fire starts. We don't have any mutual aid from other municipalities like West Kelowna, Lake Country can all help each other. We're basically a desert in the island. So it's very gratifying and thankful that you're here located at our regional airport. And I guess my question, as you're there, and we've been talking to ministers at every level, there's board members here from the Kamloops Airport, and it's a regional airport on your behalf. And we know you've done some improvements at the airport lands. If you had Christmas coming to you next week, as a people on the ground, I respect you know more than a minister sitting in Victoria of what's needed and what's hampering you to address, respond, prevent fires at the grounds at the airport. Is there anything we can do or haven't asked other levels of government to assist you to make that stay better?
Yeah, so I don't think it's all just about money and adding extra resources, to be honest. I think it's actually about getting together and speaking and looking at those jurisdictions and remembering that the fire doesn't care about that. When it comes to the city of Kamloops, when it comes to the jurisdiction that we manage, when it comes to the next community across, we need to be unified in our response in that space and know that that fire is transiting towards us and working together. And that's where I see some of our biggest challenges at the moment in terms of how do we coordinate. You mentioned there that there's no mutual aid pieces within the city here. Maybe not for some of the structural fire department pieces, but there is ability for us to coordinate across the whole province and pull in tenders and resources from wherever we need to do so. And we have that department within our own provincial office, as well as have that opportunity to look at the broader scale incident as it's evolving and decide what that needs to be. But that comes down to us playing at that tabletop exercise level, really dedicating time to focusing on what we need to be successful if a fire was to transit through here, and having comprehensive plans instead of just trying to deal with it as it's coming. We can always add more people, but we can't put a person behind every tree. And that's the reality of this. Like we have to be strategic about how it happens. And we look as we use the benefits of some of the AI to look at the mapping, to look at the risk profile, to look at what a fire will do if it transits through a community. That's where we're going to start getting more time available to sit down with the right people and plan what that incident needs to be, and making sure that we're getting the structure protection into place ahead of that fire arrival and not after it's passing through, and making sure that we're actually accessing all of that resource available to us across the whole province, and making sure it's then backfilled from adjacent communities that don't have as high risk at the same time. And so that takes a lot of time scratching your head and sitting around the table with the people on the ground, honestly, the fire chiefs and our zone offices, and actually tabletopping it. If a fire happens here, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond? Planning it out. So I think it's opening ourselves up to having more access to that time is critical.
So my last ask would be, you talked about the night vision and how that's really improved, more time of year to fight fires. If you had to ask for an industry or a business or a partnership to be at the YK lands with you to support you in a quicker, timely fashion, what would be that type of industry or an ask if you had a wish?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of some of the heavy equipment operations and some of the support services. We know the city of Kamloops, when it comes to the summertime, is inundated with tourists as well as people that are unhoused from actual incidents. having some more accommodation services would be something that we'd certainly latch onto, because we will always be bringing people in to help support and surge across the province. So, and then having food services as well is something that's always critical. We need to feed these people.
I have Directors Houghton, Sal, Carpuck, and Thorpe. Director Houghton.
Thank you, Chair Roden, and thank you for your presentation. My angle this morning is going to be on our first responders teams. We have a very well-organized one in Knutsford, just south of town. And I believe we had one fire so far in the Knutsford area. I believe it was out Stump Lake, Trap Lake Way, and the Kurt group, well-organized. We're on it early. We had a truckload of water come from Knutsford and had it in an organized fashion, and you folks came in after and took control of the fire. And I really think that these first respond groups, I know the Knutsford one especially, are a real asset to us rural folks, especially in the agricultural industry, in our different land holdings where we have an organized group that, and they just don't work during fire season. Knutsford group works 12 months of the year, organized, have training centers. Terry Doy is always giving them up-to-date training at Knutsford, and they've got all the technical apparatus you can to for night vision, and they're always looking at maps for lightning. And I'm really glad that since the 23 Rossmore fires, that 13 groups like that have been formed within the TNRD and are helpful to you folks. And I hope that the relationship can be really, great between both, because I think both sides can benefit from it. So I just wanted to share that I know Terry Jessup and the crew seem to have a good relationship with you, and I know they keep you in close contact. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And what I'll just add to that is they're a very passionate group and work alongside us really well. And they've had a lot of experience and a lot of training. And I think that's the critical piece we need to lean into here. Is like this can't just happen overnight with a group. We're talking about some of these crews responding either in the first response piece where it's critically dangerous. There's the danger tree aspect of where we now operate in with the severe drought codes. It's getting incredibly hard for our staff to get into these incidents safely. And I really don't want to see people getting injured. We should not be losing life or getting severe injuries from this type of work. This is people's livelihood, as what they want to be critical responders, but we have to do it safely. And that's so it's not just we can build a crew overnight. There's a place for a crew overnight where we can start to into that entry level kind of work where we're kind of further back, or support services in and around accommodations and camp facilities and those kind of things. Like there's so many things that go into how we respond. It doesn't just need to be at the fire line, because it's a dangerous place and it's not for everybody.
Thank you, Director Sal.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I got a question and a thank you afterwards. So there was a company a few months ago based out of Kamloops that was claiming they have a contract with the province to do some sort of involving cloud seeding to prevent lightning from forming. Is that a program under BC? Wow, are you aware of that program? Or
I'm aware of a company that's looking at this piece, but not partnered with us. There's a number of companies out there that are looking at AI and looking at different ways to do things. We see it down through the States. Even when we were in Australia, we heard all these stories of different companies coming out of the woodwork. We're not in partnership with them at the moment, and we often get a lot of people come to us with ideas. It's like any industry, I guess. But right now, we're doing what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. And I want to thank you. So in the last year, I noticed there's been a lot of BC wildfire crew helping out with other provincial ministries of BC parks in the Wells Gray Park area. We had crews from your teams come up and do danger tree falling for trail clearing, as well as Ministry of Transportation and Transit after they did or their contractor did brushing along the Wellsbury Park corridor. They left some fuel behind, and your crews came out and helped clean up. So I want to thank you for that, and hopefully that's a growing trend to get your team more involved in other stuff year round. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a mutual benefit to a lot of that work, be it the danger tree assessing or timber falling. We have to keep our staff active in their minds, engaged with this kind of dangerous work. And so it's constant rotational training. And so we're always looking for options for that. Not to just do menial work, but just to be out there and actually training and testing. And if there's a mutual benefit to a park or a recreational area, that's great.
Thank you, Director Karpuk.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Manager Dunn. And is Nicole, is it? Yes. Couple things. I think one of the things that as a person who is in Director Sau's Area A with some property, it's funny, I think I may have some of that firewood that was left on the side of the road now in my shed, but fire is a tool. And it's been around long since people thought of fire as a risk factor, I think, in the context of life and limb. But in that we use this tool, whether it's for cultural burning or prescribed burns, I'm curious. We've been looking to do some prescribed burns in around Kamloops in partnership with BC Parks, Lactobol grasslands. It seems like every time I'm sort of pressing our fire chief, when are we going to burn? It's like, oh, well, you know, BC Wildfire says venting index. And are we over-regulated to the point where we can't actually do what we need to do to help prevent our communities from burning up? Because when I hear there's a risk, there's smoke. Well, there's a greater risk in the summer that smoke is going to be all day, all night, and for weeks on end if we don't do some of these works, let alone we may not be living in the homes that we'd like to live in. So I'm curious from your perspective, if there's opportunities to kind of at least get some partial burns done, either to set up strategic guards, because it just seems like we have to have the optimal conditions is what I keep hearing thrown around, yet they almost don't exist. And you see that historically, we've been able to do things when we didn't have optimal conditions and achieve the outcome. So have we now got regulated in your perspective to the point where we almost can't do the work? I do have a follow-up.
Yeah, so I'll answer that. It's very challenging, and it's quite honestly pretty frustrating to try and move through this process in some cases. We do tend to get a lot of public backlash around smoke out of season. It's quite honestly, it's how do you want your smoke? It's either going to happen in the summer, or we can do it in a regulated environment where we can actually plan out and have a lower intensity fire burn across the landscape and have our protection built into the site. We were very unfortunate this year in terms of some of the partnerships with the city here to burn within the city limits. Weather systems didn't align, but we were very close, and that's taken a few years to get to that planning stage. We now, as I said earlier, we have a number of these projects ready to go, so we've got through the hurdles that we've had to deal with. But there is a lot of work we still need to do, and I want to bring that work together with local governments to talk about how we're going to educate the communities to the necessity to do some of this stuff. And in particular, a great project up on the hill here, where we could actually use it as an educational piece. But there is a number of challenges. There's a lot of stakeholders involved, and it's trying to get them all around the table at the same time to talk about what the overall objective is. Are we trying to do a risk reduction? Are we trying to do ecosystem restoration? Like, we know that it's likely to burn, and so we should be planning for that as an aspect, and then looking at what give and take we're going to do off the sides of that. I think that's the critical piece that we need to start putting our minds to is, do we want to have treatments done for protection of communities, or do we want to do them just for project's sake? And so, yeah.
So a follow-up question, it comes to that. I believe in the past there was an offer made with regards to communities that may have danger trees, or to the work you just spoke about with Director Ussoff and the work that you've done in the BC Parks and the Wellsbury corridor in that area, where communities in our regional district may have in the early part of your season an opportunity to bring in crews and get chainsaw work practice and things like that. Is that offer still extend from BC Wildfire?
There's a number of complications with trying to do that for liability pieces, but we're certainly looking at where those parcels of land are and working with the district office when it comes to the wildfire risk reduction projects, and how we can tie these all together is critical. And so maybe there will be options then with some of those, like if there's a plot of land that's privately owned within the middle of a good defendable area, maybe then we could start talking about what that could look like for tree falling as well.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, I got a couple. So community response groups, they also do a lot of Fire Smart as well. I live in area I. I have 7 of those groups in my area. Some of those groups have been instrumental in keeping some of the major wildfires from becoming more of a disaster than they were. So when you say that you can't have a BC wildfire guy behind every tree, we can have these groups pretty well in every little community. So what I would kind of like to advocate for and ask about is a question around training going forward, making sure that there's adequate training, because the training programs that we had in effect last year, we don't have this year. And their future. I was recently at a community wildfire roundtable in Lillooet, and the SLRD was talking about, we know that they are often the first responder, but they're not technically supposed to be. So trying to figure out something that would still keep them safe as a first responder, whether it's they can only deal to a certain class, and as soon as it hits, say, level 3, they have to back off, or these kind of things. What do you see? This is my first question, is how do you see their future helping complement BC wildfire and seeing that we have adequate training?
Yeah, so very, very complex.
Mhm.
So the type of incident, like trying to classify an incident in that first 24 hours is going to be very challenging to do. And that's where I bring up that real risk. We don't want people to get injured. We also recognize that people within community that have a vested interest are probably going to do some level of response, but we don't have the ability yet to develop those crews to the level that they need to be doing that initial attack response. There's a lot of good work happening with local fire departments and brigades that have adequate background training that complements into that space. But when you start looking at the forest stands that we're working within and the danger tree aspects that come with that, it's not just the fire they're challenged with, it's all the other pieces and all the aviation resources that are going overhead. And so, but trying to classify it in that space can be a challenge. But certainly agree more training is better. And through our partnership with TRU, we're hopefully going to start seeing more access to more credentials that help bring people up to the standard that they need to be feeling safe while operating in those spaces.
No, I want them safe, trust me. My second question kind of follows up on Director Carpak's and Director South. When we're talking about the chainsaws and getting the danger tree clearing and stuff, we have a lot of egress routes that are somewhat overgrown and not the easiest to navigate. And you need training in the spring or when you're downtime. So how do we work with you potentially with these identified egress routes to help make these egress routes a little more traversable should the need, before it's run for your life, and at the same time help you with your training?
Yeah, so I think that comes back to a little bit to the comment I made earlier about getting around the table and talking about what these egress plans look like. How do we actually develop which roads are the egress for that community, and then working with the district office that is charged with the land management to prioritize those and then look at options for wildfire risk reduction funding along those adjacent corridors, and then being able to bring in a resource like ourselves to help support with some of the danger tree falling. But short of having an actual concrete plan in place, it gets very challenging for us to decide what the priority level is and where we should target our efforts on.
Kevin?
So
Please.
in terms of the training for the individual groups, that going forward, or?
Identified egress routes that they could maybe help with?
Yeah, so that's certainly something that we've been working with. And what makes it a little tricky is that a lot of those routes fall under the purview of the local forest district offices. So we have been doing quite a bit of work, and Mr. Knopf in the back here, particularly with that district, in terms of sharing the line work, the mapping for those routes. But it's possibly not kind of getting fully shared out. And in fairness, it's also something that we've been advocating for quite a bit for more of a consistent provincial approach. So yeah, the work's happening, but I think it's just kind of connecting the dots right now.
Thank you. That sounds like a discussion that could continue outside this chamber. Absolutely. If there are no more questions or comments, just a quick look around the room. Thank you very much for that update. Here's hoping for a quiet fire season and that I haven't just jinxed it. And just a reminder to the board that we have emergency management and climate readiness who will be joining us. And then we have two more presentations. We have a TNRD emergency program update, and we have a discussion on fringe area policy. I presume everyone's going to want to go for a coffee and a cookie or a bathroom break. And it is almost 10 to 11. So next up, we are going straight into emergency management and climate readiness. We have a presentation from the Senior Regional Manager, Andrew Morrison, on seasonal preparedness. Mr. Morrison, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members and staff, for the invitation today. There is a presentation with a few slides. I kept it really short, though.
Sorry, we seem to have a lot of people moving towards the washrooms and the coffee. Would it be all right if we took like a 5-minute break, everyone? I will be timing. 5-minute break right now? Okay.
Sure.
5 minutes, I'm setting my stopwatch. That was 5 minutes exactly. So we're going to go back into session and I will welcome back for the second time, Andrew Morrison. Welcome back, Mr. Morrison. It's good to see you again.
Does that work? Is this on? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members. Thank you, staff, for the invitation today. Just wanted to touch on one thing really quick. Job title change, Director of Regional Response now, no longer Senior Regional Manager. Same job, new title, but that's okay. Where's the button? That way. Does that work? Sometimes. Nope, we're not working. Where am I pointing? There's a few slides I can just advance. You can just advance for me. Let's go back one. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Kept this very brief opportunity for lots of questions if there's time. So one of the things we're working on right now is keeping an eye on the current hazard trends. This was a slide from about last week because I've been on the road all week. But current flooding scenarios were low to moderate. Some areas in the province are seeing some minor flooding due to snowmelt. Nothing due to rain at the moment. Our landslide trends are stable. We do keep an eye on winter weather this time of year because it can really affect the mountain passes and transportation. Avalanche danger right now, as it increases in the spring, is stable, although we have had 4 fatalities in 2 separate incidents in the past month. I believe there was recently another one in the northwest as well. Now, which button is that? That one. There we go. Okay. So touch on seasonal hazard outlook. So the major hazards that we'll be preparing for and working with communities to prepare for is freshet flooding, wildfire, drought, and heat. How are we going to help everybody prepare that? We're going to bring together, we're going to continue on with our weekly staff calls. Weekly, your staff and our staff at the province are invited to weekly hazard calls with Environment Climate Change Canada, River Forecast Center, BC Wildfire, and in the winter, Avalanche Canada. We'll also be restarting up the mayors and chairs, First Nations chiefs, and MLA technical briefings. I know my calendar got populated yesterday, so I expect you'll see those coming your way soon. These are just images from different periods of time, but the top left image is to highlight the River Forecast Center high stream flow and flood warnings that will come out periodically depending on conditions. The one on the right, of course, is our friends at BC Wildfire Service. The bottom left is the BC Drought Portal. The BC Drought Portal has not started up for this year that I'm aware of. It will be starting in the coming weeks. And the bottom right is to highlight the Environment Climate Change Canada weather warnings that they will produce and are available on the Environment Climate Change Canada app. So this is the April 1st snowpack bulletin. This really tells us what, gives us a sense of what the season could look like. Overall, we see significant lower snowpacks in our region in the TNRD. I say our, I live here. So what does this mean? We're below, a lot of areas are below normal. However, what we have to pay attention to is those periods of very increased temperatures. So this weekend, they're forecasting increased warming. If events like that can be followed by rain, we can still see seasonal flooding. As we move forward in the spring, we'll have to keep an eye on thunderstorms because as we've seen in this region, there's been a number of flooding type events that have been caused by intense rainfalls. I am going to skip over this just because it was presented at by our wildfire colleagues earlier. So drought's the other one that we're really going to be paying attention to this summer. This is the national outlook from February 28th, but definitely highlights that there's still areas of the province that are considered at risk for drought going forward. The other thing that we're really paying attention to for the summer is the forecasts for heat. There's lots of media articles that are using all kinds of different words like super El Nino, but we're not really sure what that's going to mean. So we're just preparing for heat. So one of the things that we've done this year, and I don't have a specific slide on it, but we've updated some of our financial standards to make it more clear what activities are eligible. Some of the pieces that we've done in that space are combining some of our previous external policies and now into our financial standards. A couple of notables, one notable, sorry, is the livestock. And with our livestock policy, livestock evacuation policy, it's now part of our financial standards, but we've removed some of the rates that were previously established to move to more of a market-based, regionally based pricing model. It allows for fluctuations that vary by region across the province. The other thing was brought up earlier in different comments, but we are planning for FIFA increasing 350,000 people into the province of BC could have consequences. So if something were to happen, we need to be prepared. So we're working with our partners in the Lower Mainland, City of Vancouver, primarily to be prepared for that event with some of the key match dates noted above or noted in the slide. So here's our 4 primary information channels. Prepared BC is a great one to share with residents in advance of the season to ensure that they have their personal preparedness plans, kits, pet plans, and things like that. It's available in digital and print. We do have guides available through our regional office. Our Emergency Info BC site is intended to be a trusted-based source of information. We aggregate a lot of the local government and nation information into that one source, shareable across the province. Emergency map, same thing, but in a map-based format. And then our climate readiness focus on mitigation and disaster information. So I will share this slide with the board here. A couple of the things I wanted to touch on before I sort of turn over to questions. I know egress routes were brought up. We continue to meet with your staff on a regular basis and the district staff to address what we can on egress routes. We have plans to create a mapping product where we can share that information in a more reasonable manner. I don't have a substantive update today, but we continue to work towards it. And then we also continue to work on sort of criteria for just-in-time maintenance and whatnot. So if we know that there's a fire in a certain area and we know that there are certain roads at risk or whatnot, we'll work with the forest district to where we can to make those improvements. The other piece, there was a question around EDMA. I sort of touched on the financial standards, but we do know that also the local authority regulation is planning to be introduced, I guess is the right word, at the spring sitting. So I don't have any specific dates on that, but we are anticipating that it could be in the spring that gets introduced. And that was sort of all I had at the moment. I figure there'd be 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you very much. Director Thorpe? Anyone else put your hand up now?
It's a quick question, or actually it's kind of a request. When you're talking about the biweekly updates with the mayors and chairs, would you please include the EA directors?
I will make that request. I don't have that power, but I will make
We
that
have been in the
request.
past. I just want to make sure we didn't get dropped off the list. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just for clarity, the mayors and chairs calls may start out in a monthly cadence, increase to biweekly, increase to weekly, potentially more than that, depending on how we're moving through the hazard season. So they do fluctuate.
Thank you. Just, I didn't have a chance to mention this for BC Wildfire, but as with my other hat on, I'm editor of a newspaper. The increase in the quality and quantity of communications around wildfires has increased exponentially since 2017 with the Elephant Hill wildfire and that disastrous fire season. I appreciate for BC Wildfire Service the very lengthy reports that come out now regarding fires with, do all members of the public need to know how many unit crews we have and how many pieces of structural equipment, helicopters and boots on the ground? Possibly not. Some people really do like to know that, but it is awesome to get that information and have it public facing and have it accessible for those who want to know it. And for Emergency Management BC, thank you very much for aggregating all the evacuation orders and alerts in one place. That is an area that I think still does need some work from some people. And I'm not trying to single out any particular group, but some First Nations bands, for example, when they put evacuation alerts and orders up, their websites are for members only, which is not very helpful to people who live around or who are trying to find out information about that particular area. So being able to have a one-stop shop for all the evac orders and alerts on EMCR is absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much for doing that, sort of herding cats there to get all that information in one spot. It's very, very helpful, particularly when you do have a very fast moving wildfire season with lots and lots of players involved. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Director Karpuk?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Quick question with regards to the modeling. And, you know, we factor in lots of different variables. Do you factor in the loss of landscape that's responsible for retention of snowpacks? I'm thinking back a couple of years, we had 17 and 18 wildfires that pretty much obliterated the Aerostone Plateau. And you've got no trees to shade snowpack. And all of a sudden we get a heat wave, and in a very short order, I think Director Ranta had pieces of infrastructure missing in his community in Cache Creek, and that was a below average snowpack year. Conditions change, but do you factor those into the modeling? Because this seems to be one of the trends as we look across the province. High elevation snowpacks, because of the heat and the extent of heat and the drought that we've had, have resulted in loss of some very significant snow holding areas. And I don't think, like Sun Peaks is doing with putting blankets on snowpacks to try and maintain for the next year, is something we got possible across the province. So I'm just curious if that's a modeling thing that you're aware that we're doing to kind of make sure we're on top of some of the changes in the landscape.
It's a great question, one I've asked myself. Unfortunately, I'm not the subject matter expert to be able to answer that. I would actually need my partners at River Forecast Center to answer that. So I can follow up and find out how they're, how the loss of tree canopy, I guess, is essentially what you're asking, is impacting snow melt. And I can follow up with that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
You.
All right. Next, we move on to our very own Manager of Community and Emergency Services, Mr. Kevin Skrepnik.
You mean fringe policy?
Well, good morning to the committee. Myself and Mr. Knopf are here to present our typical sort of pre-season spring update. In the interest of avoiding duplication, we're not going to touch on some of the pieces that our colleagues from Wildfire and EMCR have already mentioned. And because we do typically do a similar presentation to this in years past, we want to focus very much on sort of where we're at now, what we're planning for in terms of the next year, the outlook for us here, and some of the roles and responsibilities, particularly for members of the board and staff once we get into the season. By all means, we're going to have some time for Q&A at the end, but if there's any questions as we're going, don't hesitate to ask. So in terms of our day-to-day emergency services team here at TNRD, there's myself, there's Mr. Knopf, who will be speaking with you shortly. We do also have Michelle Kozashar, who is also in that emergency program coordinator role. Michelle's not with us today because Kamloops is actually hosting the province-wide emergency support services conference up at TRU. So Michelle is up there representing us, and we will have staff as well as TNRD volunteers there throughout the weekend. So this is our day-to-day team. Now, we do have the 2 emergency program coordinators currently. This was a discussion that came up during the budgeting process. As Mr. Morrison alluded to, we do have the new Emergency Act that came in 2023, but a lot of the specific requirements in terms of what we as a local authority are going to have to meet to address the new legislation is going to be fleshed out in those regulations, which we are hoping are going to come out this spring. So this has been a bit of a temporary piece right now. So we do have both of these positions funded through to the end of the year. And we're hoping that when we sit down for the budget this fall, we'll have a clearer picture of what our capacity is going to need to look like to ensure that we're meeting our requirements going forward. The emergency program currently is fairly focused on the electoral areas. That's where 80% of our funding comes from. But 7 of the member municipalities do also pay into that for some support and preparedness service as well. And that could shift to, again, once ourselves and all of the municipalities have a chance to absorb those new regulations coming out. I will turn it over to Mike to talk about the season that was.
Oh, the season that was. So good morning, everyone. As we heard from BC Wildfire, a fairly light fire year last year, and Kevin, I think, is going to talk about some of the specific events. As you can see, some of the stats on the screen. Some 6 properties on order last year, 122 on an evacuation alert. Those are really light numbers for a typical year for the TNRD, so we were really thankful about that. 5 states of local emergency, some staff hours that we're in, 512 staff hours in the EOC. A fairly significant contribution, 20 emergency notices, as well as invitations from other governments for our staff to go and support them in their emergency events. I think one of the keys from this slide is these are really light numbers for the TNRD. For some other governments in the province, this is, oh my gosh. They don't run across this in an average year. So really not a big workload for the TNRD because we do this every year, but they're not insignificant numbers.
Yeah, so some of the kind of specific incidents we had last year, certainly not an exhaustive list, but we did have the Mount Scatcherd fire that was just outside Chase and Esconlith just before the Canada Day holiday last year. The Nakaya Creek, Isman Creek, and Cantilever Bar wildfire were all in Area I in fairly close proximity to Lytton. The Mine Creek wildfire, which is the photo we've got on the screen now, was the late season fire we had on the Coquihalla in early September that blew up there when a wind event came through. And then a few more unorthodox events we were managing last year. We did have the Fader Lake dam failure, which on the previous slide, that's none other than GM Vieira digging dirt on a Thanksgiving long weekend there, along with some crews from BC Wildfire. In addition to that, some debris flows, of course, the CP KC rail derailment last October as well, and some other knock-on events too. So there was some concern in the Venables Valley around post-wildfire landslide due to some significant rain last year. And then there was also not, and this is where a bit of the rub was, the algae bloom on Nicola Lake. We were kind of part of managing that, but a bit jurisdictionally complicated, as Director Laird is certainly well aware of. So with the no, actually, I'll leave it on to you.
Right, so a couple door knocking exercises we did last year, working with Kamloops SAR and the RCMP just on fine tuning some of the processes and procedures for what it looks like if we're going to be door knocking for evacuation orders, where we are actually planning another one this year. We're going to be doing a bit of a door knocking exercise around Pinnetan Lake. Usually trying, Kamloops SAR is really keen on doing this, so we're really looking to try to get it, this is, well, a 6 p.m. thing on a Monday night. That's what you get when you use SAR. They all have day jobs. So tremendous contribution from Kamloops SAR, and really appreciate that. Some of the activities we're currently under, well, we are getting ready for, everybody keeps saying, what about fire season? What about fire season? We haven't seen Frechette yet. So, we're not looking past Frechette to fire season. It's aware where it's there, but as we saw some of the snowpack numbers, and I think we talk about that again here, we haven't seen Frechette yet. So we are prepared. We've got our duty officer schedule. So there is a 24/7 duty officer with the TNRD 250-819-4105, you'll get a TNRD staff member who can activate the EOC and make, things start to happen. We've got our EOC staffing plan now, set out. We've asked for staff for availability, and we've built that staffing plan to the end of August. So, we are ready to go with staffing. We've been doing lots of training and exercising, working with some First Nations. Just did a great exercise in the village of Clinton and High Bar. Activated their EOC, worked through a state of local emergency process. What does an order look like? What does an alert look like? How do you get additional resources? So prepared to do that with the member municipalities. If you, have a need and desire, happy to exercise and, shake the dust off some of those processes. The Minister of Agriculture has been really busy this year. They built some tools to try to help, supply supports directly to the agriculture community, specifically around access passes, looking for a process on how do we enable people to get into an order area, when does it happen, how does it happen, and how do we work with other governments that have orders that may need to be accommodated at the same time. So lots of really good work going on there. We just finished in this room an EOC Essentials course for some of our staff and the communities around the TNRD. Amazing buy-in from our staff to work in the TNRD's EOC. People hear that it's a high-performing environment, they want to be involved. So it's great. We've got great buy-in from staff. And then, we've been accessing EOC grants, trying to get equipment, training, and, we've got another submission in. We've just finished buttoning in all that up and getting all of the accounting details for the province so that we can, effectively get all our money back. Emergency support services. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the program. These are the volunteers that help support in evacuations and orders. Currently, we have a team that we support in Clearwater, Barrier, Chase, Clinton, Cache Creek, and Ashcroft. Chase just got a couple new volunteers there, so that's great, building some more capacity. Really, the goal is that we can accomplish supports for level 1 events, which are, an immediate house fire and somebody's standing on the sidewalk, holding their babies in the rain, and how do we support those folks? So the province has brought in some really good tools where if, someone can go and, stay with the friends and family, we can provide direct supports to them, money directly into their bank account. A little plug for the BC Services card. How many people here know what the BC Services card is? A few hands, but let's see some more next time I ask that question. If you need to, by all means, you can reach out. I can provide you some direction on how to get it. It enables effectively for you to say that you are authentically you and access government services through your phone. So this registers you. You probably used it maybe to book an immunization through COVID or your medical health. You can get into your tax records. It's a way to officially say you're you. So BC Services card, look it up. If you have your BC Services card authenticated, and there's a bit of a process there to ensure that you are you, then through the evacuation tool, you can have direct support sent to your bank account, which, means you can be supported over a phone call, you can be supported over the internet. You don't need to physically show up at a place. So BC Services card is something, if you can get one person educated on that, that's a great service.
It's just can't understate some of the improvements we've seen in this world, and that example that Mike just provided. So as we had mentioned, we had the opportunity to, I was able to deploy to Vancouver Island this past summer to assist there because we had a quieter season at home. And the Wesley Ridge fire, which was kind of in the Little Qualicum, Cameron Lake area, there were about 400, 450 people evacuated. Only a handful of them were in hotels that had actually been arranged for by the ESS team. Everyone else was utilizing these self-service functions. So they were getting direct deposit money and they were basically taking care of themselves. So when you consider that in comparison with events we've had here in the past where we've got thousands of people that we're trying to individually take care of, that these volunteers are trying to support, this system has really helped modernize that.
Yeah, and certainly we've seen success. We recently had a level 1 house fire in Vavenby, and that resident was actually in barrier at the time, but managed, I mean, didn't actually have to go and stand and look at their burnt dwelling to receive the supports. So we were able to support them while they were in barrier. Last bullet on here, we need more volunteers. So I mentioned where we have the teams. If you don't see, you know, your community listed there, well, that's the nearest resource. So TNRD is very geographically spread out, as you're all aware. If you know of community members that would like to provide this service, not necessarily required to be in one of those communities, we can support individuals regardless of where they are. Happy to provide some training and build that capacity. So if you run across a community member that you think is really engaged and enthused and would be a good ESS volunteer, by all means, send them my way. We've had a bunch about the seasonal outlook. You know, 104-ish, normal-ish sort of snowpack is, you know, the high numbers, but certainly you saw in the news that there is a fairly wide discrepancy on how that snow is sitting on the land base provincially. Will there be a wildfire this year? Yes, there will be. When and where it is really, you know, up in the air. But yes, there will be a fire. Oh, and I didn't have the last snow. I did want to talk a little bit about the snowpack. Depending where you are in the TNRD, the snowpack really varies. The North Thompson, very normal-ish. The South Thompson, you know, 85-ish%. Once you get over to, you know, area I, L and M, they all start to drop down quite a lot. And the Okanagan is significantly low in most of their snow pillows, and that's sort of where you're seeing the influence in N and M, where they start to drop down. So it is variable, but again, a rain on snow event, and you know, we're going to see some heat come this weekend, yay. So that'll start burning off a lot of that snow, and we are very, you know, the low and mid elevation snow has pretty much been gone for a while. So, you know, it is really, really dry out there. But there is, you know, 1,300 meters you run into the snow line. So we'll see what happens. And, you know, we're looking forward to some early season April heat.
Yeah, and just kind of on that regional variability, it's incredibly high. So looking at some stations in the Blue River area, they're showing some of the highest numbers that they've ever seen for the amount of snow in those areas. And then you look at Brenda Mines, so just outside of TNRD, over towards Peachland and West Kelowna. It's the lowest they've ever had in history, and it's the earliest that they've ever been snow-free at this time of year. So again, the nature of our geography and the nature of our climate in this province is that there are going to be areas much more impacted, and it's going to be highly variable. And obviously with TNRD, you know, going from desert to rainforest, we're going to have different challenges in different areas. So on the kind of on the roles and responsibilities piece, you know, and this is something that, you know, we've touched on in previous years. So the chair or designate is going to be responsible for declaring a state of local emergency if one is necessary. We require a state of local emergency or a SOL to unlock the powers within the Emergency Act. 99% of the time, the powers that we're tapping into is around evacuation orders. So we cannot put in a formal evacuation order until we do have a declaration of local emergency declared. Once that's happened, A lot of the responsibilities are delegated down to the EOC director, but we are obviously keeping elected officials in the loop as much as possible. If this is let's say it's a fire, flood, whatever it might be is in your area, you're going to be notified by staff. I think Mr. Hildebrand's typically taking the lead on that, or a designate from our senior team to make sure that impacted EA directors are aware. Once we've got, an ongoing emergency and the EOC is activated, you're going to be getting regular updates again from Mr. Hildebrand. We do ask that, the communications try to stay focused sort of to the senior staff level when it's coming from the elected officials, just so that we can let our EOC personnel focus on their operational kind of day-to-day responsibilities. And then, having said all that, as an elected official, you're going to be arguably the most important conduit for reaching these people. We have a lot of tools at our disposal. Mr. Davies does a fantastic job in terms of leveraging our Voyant Alert and social media and everything else. But as the local elected officials, you're going to have the best sense for those communities. You're going to know the people that we need to reach into to get information out there, reliably and credibly. So we'll certainly be looking for your support on that once we are into the season. And I believe that is all we've got for you, and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Just a plea out there to all the agencies responsible in this headlong rush to take advantage of new and improved ways of communication. Please don't forget that a significant number of people are challenged when it comes to online. I know 2 or 3 years ago during fire season, the website for ESS was everywhere. The phone number for ESS, very, very hard to find. I finally wrote it down somewhere because I was tired of trying to search for it. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting at a desk in an office at my leisure. If I had been evacuated from my home and was trying to find this phone number, how am I going to find it? So just please don't forget that there are people out there who don't have smartphones, who don't have apps, who would not know a QR code if it bit them in the backside. And please don't forget the old school, a person with a smile saying, how can I help you to find the supports you need? Sorry. Anyone have any questions or comments? Director Sal and then Director Houghton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you, Kevin. I believe the last wildfire season, you were lending your expertise to other regional districts. So shout out to, lending our busy EOC experience across the province.
Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. In the OC this year, and I hope we won't need them, but are we reaching out to our agricultural support team that we normally get? Robson and Ryan and the group that really helps in the rural world and in the ag world. Are they going to be with us again?
Yeah, they actually attend. We had a recent training session hosted by the BC Agriculture Council, and that was up at TRU. It was a fairly large scale event, and yeah, they were both there. So really keen to be engaged again this year. And yeah, thank goodness, because there's such a huge resource. And that's the key to success, is using the individuals who have the skills and knowledge.
Thank you, Director Getz.
Touching on Chair Roden's comment, when we had the flood where we were evacuated back in 2021, 3:30 in the morning, it was very hard to find any information at all. So what we've done with our emergency services manager and our ESS, a little plug, they're the best trained in the country. Anyway, every year at tax time, we send out a little drop in the pamphlet about your contacts, your EOC, your contacts, your ESS, your routes out of the community and everything like that. So we drop that in there. So every, people who want to see it, they can put it on their fridge. We call it a door knocker. So we make sure that's in every year that we throw out the taxes. So, and it's also available from City Hall if anybody wants it.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments? All right.
And I'll just say, so in terms of the chair's comments around, the communication methods, it's still our aim that certainly in an evacuation order, that there is going to be a in-person contact. So whether that's RCMP, search and rescue, our own staff have gone out to put those evacuation orders in place as well. Obviously, that can be challenging given our geographic size, and which is why Mike and Michelle and the team try to maintain such close relationships with RCMP detachments, search and rescue groups like that to support us.
Yep, no, absolutely. And that's a question that comes up a lot during fire season, particularly when a community, especially when it goes under evacuation alert, a lot of people want to know, well, how will I know if we are ordered to evacuate? And the answer is always someone will physically knock on your door. And I know that's not going to change. I was thinking more of after you've been evacuated, you're in a strange place, you're trying to figure out how to access these supports. And I know the push is to more online, but there are a significant number of people for whom that's a challenge. So yeah, so just trying to, and I know that's not really us, but for whoever out there is listening.
And Mr. Knopf also reminds me here, we've taken efforts, I don't know if they've been included in tax notices, but Mr. Davies has been including in the electoral area specific newsletters. We've been putting out lots of information about Voyant Alert so people can sign up for that. Again, to your point, not a silver bullet for everybody in terms of technological capability for people. And then we do also have an ELC phone number that's in service round the clock, whether it's activated or not, for folks to reach in. Even if it is, to your point, provincial services they're trying to access, we can at least try to help them through it.
Best way to get people to sign up for Voyant Alert is to have an emergency in an area, and the people who are on Voyant Alert will be saying, hey, I heard about it through Voyant Alert. And then suddenly more people are signing up for it. Director Karpak.
Thank you, Chair. Just in thinking about reaching out and in terms of evacuations and notices and like that, across the province, we have large encampments that seem, or small and large, that seem to be on the fringes of some of our crown. How do we deal with that? I'm thinking we have quite a large encampment in the Jameson Creek area that I keep hearing about, haven't been there to visit. In the news, they've had areas down around Penticton and Oliver, throughout the Okanagan that may or may not be a residential address. How do we factor that in consideration of our evacuations?
Well, I'd say, if you're aware of those kind of encampments, and it's in an area, definitely let us know about it. Because in a lot of cases, I mean, I live in West Side, so I see talk about the Jameson encampment on Facebook every morning. But if it was in other areas of the region, that might not be the case, right? In terms of getting those people evacuated, yeah, that is important. It gets a little trickier, and I'll pass it to Mr. Knopf in terms of if he has any comments around what their eligibility is for support. That gets a little murkier, but certainly they're going to be a hard to reach group, and we might not know they're there, and that can definitely complicate issues. Another wrinkle that we've encountered with multiple evacuations in the last few years is a major highway will be closed as a result of the fire, and we've got online mapping products like Google and things like that sending people directly into the areas that we're evacuating. And I can say in Turtle Valley in 2023, when we were up there with members of the Pritchard Fire Department putting that evacuation in place in the middle of the night, most of the vehicles up there were people who were traveling from Calgary to Vancouver, and Google had sent them straight into the fire, while the residents up there were trying to get out. So it's an issue. Anything on the eligibility? Yeah.
Well, I mean, eligibility is fairly loose in evacuation from wildfire. If you are living in what you call your home and you are not able to be there anymore, ESS is going to support you. That's pretty clear. How we support some of the vulnerable and the folks who are living, in the backcountry is a very difficult problem, because often folks move into the backcountry so nobody knows they're there. So, how do you effectively support a population that doesn't want to be found? That can be very difficult. That's a partnership with, the BC Wildfire Service, conservation officers, and natural resource officers. They know the land base best. And likely, if we're talking about an evacuation in, the Crown land, there are crews going back and forth who will bring that subject up to us.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Director Getz.
Kevin, maybe you can address this because I've asked this question before. And so I'm involved with ESS with my wife. One of the things that we have seen in the past is where a wildfire is approaching an area and people are suggested to be ready to go at any point in time. And then a suggestion comes on that it might be a good idea to get out now. So the people get out now, but they haven't been officially evacuated. They show up to ESS, want to be registered, but because they're still in the green, not the red, we can't register them. So now they're stuck in our town. We can't give them any services at all because they're not under evacuation. So my comments in the past is maybe we should just say, get ready to go, but don't say get out while you can because there's no services for them when they arrive to your ESS office. Then you look like a big jerk because you can't do anything for them.
Yeah, so Chair through to Director Getz. So yeah, that is a complicated one. There is a process to support those people, but it is a case by case process. So it's referred to as an extraordinary evacuee authorization. So it can happen, and it's for that exact reason. You know, people might be on alert. For whatever reason, it is necessary for them to leave. We typically see this in terms of medical things, stuff like that. It could also be on the flip side where an order has been lifted, but maybe there's no power in the area and these people are on a dialysis machine or they use CPAP, things like that. So there is a process, but it's onerous because we as an EOC have to handle that case by case. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, that has to go to the pre-auc for approval.
Yeah, there is a process. It's called, extraordinary evacuees, but it's very much intended for, elders and folks with, health issues or some other extenuating circumstances, maybe, ambulatory challenges where it's not reasonable to evacuate on a very short time frame. What I'm hearing from you is when somebody said, oh, well, you should leave now if you can, it would be a good idea, but there is no actual order and support for that. So, I guess the question is, where's the message coming from? And ideally, training and education can prevent that kind of a message. Because yeah, you can build a world of hurt if somebody says, oh, well, you should all evacuate now, and they're in a leadership role because people are going to listen.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Kraus, last but certainly not least.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just wait for the PowerPoint to come up. So I'll be talking about the fringe areas policy today. And I'll try to keep my presentation as short as I can to ensure there's enough time for board discussion, because I think that's really what's important today. I'll go over the history of the fringe areas policy paper, how we got here, and then I'll cover each of the 8 policies. There's only 8 policies, so I thought I'd bring each one up one by one, and then we can dissect those and I can explain how it's used in practice. I have heard concerns about the name of the policy, the age of the policy, and questions about whether it's even still relevant today. And all of those are good things to ask. If there are concerns, I'd really like to know where it hurts today so that we know where to go from here, or if the board is satisfied with keeping it as is. So how did we get here? In 1980, the board set up a planning committee, and it was made up at that time of 5 board members and some planning staff that were their kind of technical expertise. That group was tasked with consulting with the municipalities, reviewing literature on best practices for growth and development around urban municipalities. And it's through that they developed a policy paper. And it was through their review of the literature where they came up with this word fringe, and they started calling it the fringe area. It comes out of urban geography, it comes out of planning textbooks. It's not something that they coined, but they started to use that term. So they created the fringe areas policy paper, which was brought to the board in 1982. And at that time, it was adopted as a bylaw, and it was an amendment to the official regional plan. So the official regional plan at that time was kind of the first, I guess, long-range planning document that tied the whole region together. And so they amended it to include that policy. In 1983, the province changed legislation, did away with that model of regional planning, and it nullified all official regional plans in the province. This policy must have been pretty important to the board at the time because months later, in just February of 1984, the fringe areas policy was brought back and this time was adopted as a special planning study. So it was adopted as a policy and a special planning study. And that's how it's been operating ever since, with only minor amendments over the years. So it sets a 5-kilometer radius around municipalities with a population over 5,000 and a 2-kilometer radius around all other smaller municipalities. That radius is what's known as the fringe area, hence fringe areas policy. 2014 was the last time the board had significant discussion and review of the policy. And at that time, they directed a number of changes, including some mapping changes, and adding one new policy, which I'll get into. So overall, why did the board want this at that time in the early 1980s? It was stated to manage growth and development pressure around municipalities and to provide an opportunity for those impacted municipalities to have an early say on an application. So they wanted to find a method to achieve that, and that's how we came about with the policy. Clicker's not working anymore. Thank you. Policy 1. So we'll start there. The board shall refer applications for amendments to official community plans, rezonings, development permits, and multi-lot subdivisions to the given municipality for its consideration and comment. In practice, this means that if a property is within that 5-kilometer or 2-kilometer radius, staff will send a referral to that municipality early in the application process for, say, a rezoning or an official community plan amendment. We send it at the same time as we send the referral to, say, the Ministry of Transportation, Interior Health. And we also send it at that time to our Advisory Planning Commission, who provides a recommendation. So staff send those referrals out, we circulate that, we collect all of the input, and then all of those comments are included in our board reports so that you have that information before you vote on the matter at this table. So there is no legal obligation to send referrals to municipalities for, say, a rezoning. And I think that's why they started with this policy to begin with, to give staff that direction that if it occurs in this area, staff are directed to send a referral to the municipality. It's also important to note that it says for consideration and comment. So it is a recommendation. Building off of that, policy 2 says that where it is referred to a municipality, the board shall consider the response, but not be bound by the municipality's recommendation. So the recommendation is non-binding. The board will consider it, but you're not obligated to follow it. You can vote freely when you come to this room and vote on planning matters. I think there's a misconception out there, and I've heard it at community meetings, where there's a belief that municipalities have a veto on land use applications. That is not true. There is no veto. So you have a recommendation, but then this group as a collective board makes the decision. I have seen directors vote contrary to a recommendation of the municipality. So the municipality was against it, still approve it, and vice versa. And I think that happens because when you all arrive at this room, you're voting individually. You're listening to not only the input of the municipality, but also the public. Public hearings are really important. You're keeping an open mind, and you're taking in all that information to make your decision, not simply what one municipality said or what another agency said. The change I've seen in the last 20 years, I will say, is a shift where some municipalities now have their staff provide comment. So in the 1982 version of the fringe areas policy, it actually stated that municipal councils would review the referrals in closed meeting. And I think that was intended so that a development application doesn't become public through the municipality. It becomes public when it arrives at this table, potentially a month or two after council has seen it. That was removed, and now many municipalities, it's the staff that provide the comment. What that means is sometimes municipal directors arrive at this table and read our report and find the recommendation of their staff as opposed to the direction set by their council. Policy 3 starts getting into uses. So agriculture, grazing, forestry is encouraged in the fringe area. Wildlife habitat shall be recognized and considered, and consideration shall be given to extractive resource-based industries that locate in the fringe, subject to specific location requirements. So agriculture, grazing, obvious. It also acknowledges things like aggregate, sand and gravel deposits often locate near a municipality but are not able to get into the municipal boundary. I've had very few questions on this policy. I don't think it was controversial. Policy 4, I have had questions on. So it says that rural residential development shall be discouraged in the fringe area. And instead, residential development shall be encouraged to locate within the boundaries of the municipalities or within areas of rural residential development outside the fringe. To be clear, this does not mean that all rural residential development is stopped within the fringe area, but new rezonings to create, say, new pockets of small lots within the fringe area are discouraged. We have examples of pockets of development within the fringe area that have been approved by the board. We have examples where in areas where we do have official community plans or the South Thompson settlement strategy, for example, where areas have been delineated within the fringe area to say this is where growth in the electoral area should occur. So again, I don't want to say that it's prevented or stopped rural residential development. And I think there's also a question of scale. If there was a 1 or 2 lot development, the board may look at that differently than say a 100 lot development that's right next to a municipal boundary. The policy itself in the guidelines, it goes on to say the consideration can be given. So again, it opens this opportunity. It doesn't say the board can't approve it. It's not a hard no, and the board is free to make a decision regardless of the policy on a case-by-case basis. Policy 5 is regarding industrial and commercial development. And it says that accepting those extractive resource-based industries requiring access to a specific resource or those industrial and commercial developments acceptable to both the regional district and municipality shall be discouraged. Not the best wording, but generally it means commercial and industrial operations are discouraged to locate in the fringe. And it recognizes the need for resource-based industries, but it also says accepting those industrial and commercial development acceptable to both the regional district and the municipality. And again, that's where there's an exception, there's an opening there. And we have cases where the development has been approved for commercial and industrial, where it was mutually agreed upon with the municipality. It also included language back in the 80s and still in there today, where if there is insufficient industrial commercial land within a municipality, consideration may be given if it is of mutual benefit. So there must have been a shortage of industrial land even then, which is something we hear about often today still. And we've had many examples where municipalities have said they don't have room for that certain type of industrial use. Therefore, they're okay with it locating in the in the electoral area. And I'll just give some examples. The board approved a highway truck stop in the fringe area at Monty Creek in 2018. The city had recommended against it. The board still approved it. So there's many examples where this is still occurring because you can make the decision as a collective when it comes before you. But I would say this is probably the policy that I've had the most questions on over the years. Policy 6, fringe areas for municipalities in the TNRD shall be more or less in accordance with the maps attached. Hard to read, but basically the red outline is the 5 kilometer buffer applied to the city of Kamloops in this case. City of Merritt also has a 5 kilometer buffer based on population. Then our smaller municipalities, I just picked on one here, has a 2 kilometer buffer. So if we get an application, staff get an application, and the property is within that, in the electoral area, but within the red of that fringe area, that's when we tell the owner of the fringe area's policy, depending on the type of use, give them a heads up about whether it's encouraged or discouraged based on the wording in the policy. And that municipal council has, or at least the municipality has a say and we can make a recommendation. In 2014, the board directed staff to change the mapping to ensure that the buffer area does not include industrial islands. So Clearwater, Clinton, and Village of Chase have industrial islands for sawmills. So it only applies to the municipal boundary proper. The question here that has come up in the past and hopefully can be discussed today as well is the 5 kilometer, 2 kilometer buffer as mapped still appropriate in 2026? Policy 7 is that the fringe area shall shift when a municipality extends its boundaries or at such time that the review is deemed advisable by the board. Again, straightforward. We've had some cases of municipal boundaries changing. And rather than having to go back and amend a map, staff can just amend that on the fly if the municipal boundary changes. And it also reminds us in here that these areas can be reviewed anytime deemed advisable by the board, which is likely why we're here today. Finally, in 2014, this was the policy that was added. And it's to say it was intended to be reciprocal. So in the case of significant or major development applications, such as official community plan or rezoning along the municipal side of a jurisdictional boundary, and if and when municipal boundary extensions are contemplated, the municipality shall refer the development to the TNRD board for comment and consideration. I think at the time there was a feeling that the policy was one way, and it should include some sort of a mechanism for board comment. Municipal extensions certainly have come to this board. I can think of some around Merritt and as well as Barrier in the last, call it 10 years. Major development referrals have been rare. In some cases, I think that's a reflection of not, especially the smaller municipalities, not having a significant or major development along their municipal boundary or along a shared boundary. In other cases, it might be that some of the municipal staff aren't familiar with this policy and don't know that there's an expectation to follow a board policy rather than a municipal policy of theirs. There's also been higher turnover and staff changes, so that might have played a factor. So those are the 8 policies. I'd like to leave it with some questions to help promote the discussion. What's going through staff's mind is, are the 8 policies still relevant today? Can these policies be maintained if they are? And are they instead better placed in official community plans, recognizing we don't have OCPs everywhere in the region? The 2 and 5 kilometer radius, is that still appropriate? Should that be changed? I understand that came up yesterday as well in the Solid Waste Committee in a discussion about referrals to municipalities when there's changes there. So if the discussion goes that way, Jamie can certainly help answer those questions. Are referrals to nearby municipalities still effective for land use applications? And then finally, on the terminology, I know I've heard some concerns about the word fringe. Should it be changed? If so, what's the board leaning towards? What are alternatives? So I'll leave it there. I'll answer questions and give time, as much time as remaining, for the board to be able to discuss this.
Okay, thank you. Director Sarai had his hand up first, so go ahead. And then I've got Director Sao. Put your hand up if you would like to contribute. Director Sarai, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm just a great report, and I can hear in your voice that the changes since 2014 was the last time it was even looked at. But I think this came forward to this board. Last time I remember was a trust company that opened up in Knutsford that was in the fringe policy. And I was still trying to understand the 2 kilometer, 5 kilometer radius. What I'm curious about, what are other RDOs doing with their fringe policy? Do they have the same type, or they have the same radius type? Have we looked at what they're doing? That's my first question. And I'm not the expert here, but I'm just curious of why we have the radius. I think if it's going to be anything, it should be right at the boundary of the city. That's my, and then if the boundary of the city changes, it automatically changes that area. But having that buffer zone sort of puts difficulty in changes when the municipalities change it. But I'm also looking at the long term. When this was first presented, I think the thought of the day was to protect businesses to stay in the municipality corridors and not lose taxation of industry into farmland and agricultural land. I think the dynamics of our landscape have changed, that businesses are opening up outside of our city limits on the other side of the river in TNRD. And I think I don't think we should be hamstrung of not having that tax base coming into the TNRD land if it's available and if it's approved by your department. So that's where I think back in the day it was to, in a better word, and I'm a city council, we were probably selfish. We wanted to keep that tax base in our area, but I think those days have changed. Just my opinion.
Through the chair, maybe I'll try to all good points. The theory behind it, though, too, was the concern that if development goes just on the outskirts of the municipality and those people are living there and the business and taxation isn't available, they're still using the services of the municipality. So that's where municipalities had concerns in the past, especially on the residential side, where you're saying perhaps those residents are still coming into the schools, the parks, and all the services that you provide, but you're not collecting the taxes for that. So that was the kind of the concern. What if we have a whole bunch of growth and it goes to the outskirts of municipalities? I think that was the mindset in the 1980s, and whether it's still there today, I mean, that's for the board to debate and discuss. What do other regional districts do? It's all over the place. They don't necessarily, nobody has a standalone policy like this. What they typically do is, it's either in two places, is either in an official community plan, and if it's in there, it's actually much more stringent than what we have, because then it really lays out, here's where the commercial is going, here's where the industrial is going, and there's not much flexibility. It has things like containment boundaries, rules of engagement, basically, in terms of who gets to do what between EA and municipality. And the second place it exists in regional districts that have a regional growth strategy is in the regional growth strategy. And again, that one has mapping that looks like a peace agreement between two warring parties. It draws lines on a map that says this is where they have it. They call them no growth areas or urban containment boundaries. So there's an expectation of where development can and can't occur. Even in our new OCPs, we're trying to be more general. We've gone away from painting lines and saying this pocket has to be commercial, so that we have some flexibility when people come in and the board can maybe make a case-by-case decision rather than painting it into specific corners. So I think the planning theory behind these policies are still strong. I don't know that you want to see commercial or industrial business fleeing, say, a municipality to a rural area where land is cheaper, taxes are cheaper or lower. I think that would be a concern for the municipalities. Now, are we actually seeing that? Not necessarily, but that's why those policies were in place.
Thank you. Next, I have Director Sal, then Director Getz, and then Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex, for the overview. Just sharing an experience recently that, Alex, you would be aware of. There is potential developers who's looking for properties to build a hotel, in either District of Clearwater or Area A. And I think, because of how long ago these policies were made, maybe the perception too of people and the regulations has gone up more stringently over the years. The expectations of some potential investors, developers that who I talk to, of like, oh, we're going to electoral area. It's a free for all. I could just build whatever. It's becoming tampered with education, and also the cost of infrastructure like water and septic. That's a major cost once they're aware that it's not actually as cheap as you think. And then, thank you, Director Thorpe, for the anyway. And I actually pushed them back towards the municipality. If you're looking for services, look at the benefits of developing in Clearwater, and I shared that with Mayor Blackwell there. So I think it is becoming more it's sorting itself out. I think the cost of development, people see the benefits of developing in an area with municipal services. So yeah, just sharing that.
Thank you. Director Getz.
Thanks for that. So for myself, this is kind of, I don't don't know if you've ever seen that movie Blade, where he lives in half his feet are in the living and half his feet are in the dead. Being a municipal mayor, I don't think this is really my decision to be thinking about this. I think this is for EA directors to come through and move this through. And then that works with, we can work again with mayor. I think my input into this probably is not I shouldn't be a part of this. I don't think this is where I have an issue that sometimes what am I doing here at TNRD, making decisions on the TNRD when I'm actually municipal mayor? Because of course I want it to work for me, correct? But I'm also a director. So I think this is the directors, not the municipal directors, but the EA directors should be discussing this. You talked about the fact that sometimes not sure if we're getting total coverage from people in the TNRD working in the city. Well, we can renegotiate that investment because TNRD pays us X amount of dollars a year for people from the TNRD who use the pool, the arena, et cetera. Those always can be renegotiated if we feel that we need to look at that because there's more population in that area. So for myself, I would prefer that the EA directors look after this, and I think municipalities should take a step back until this is built. This is just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex, for focusing on these issues, these 8 policies. I'm one of 3 areas that surround the city of Kamloops. And earlier this week, I was actually out in the Valley View area and found my way driving, saw the old TNRD building. And what's interesting about the old TNRD building is I think Mayor Ranta was involved, but I don't think anybody else was involved. And that building was a small little building that's now been eclipsed by a bunch of buildings, engineering buildings and a few other things. It's a bit of a nondescript building today. But that was where these policies were brought in for all the reasons that they brought them in. And that's 46 years ago. When I first came to British Columbia, I went to that building and I started talking about Tobiano. And Tobiano, even though it wasn't within this specific 2 to 5 kilometers, was very much considered under the fringe area policy, so much so that Mr. Randy, help me with it, Randy Deal, I was going to say Mike Deedles, but Randy Deal came out and we talked at length about the pros and cons of this potential, what is now Tobiano, what it was contributing, what it wasn't contributing, what about the tax base, so on and so forth. So the fringe area policy as a concept was not being applied within 2 to 5 kilometers, but was helping to define in people's minds at that time how rural areas outside of the municipal should be developed or should they be developed. And that was 30 years ago. So not 46 years ago when it was created, but 30 years ago. And when you ask, you've asked the question, which of these policies should still be in place? The first couple policies are collaborative, and that's what the TNRD is. It's a collaboration between municipal areas and rural areas. And absolutely, I think that planning staff of municipalities should be canvassed when something is happening near their border, but just outside of their border. I don't have any problem with that. And you've mentioned policy 8 was sort of a follow-on policy, a reciprocal that says, hey, well, if that's happening for you, shouldn't it happen for us? So that's a collaborative policy. I think those are great things. Policies 3, 4, and 5 are obsolete. Policies 3, 4, and 5 talk about what the world was like in, 46 years ago or 30 years ago. And I was doing some research on this, and they now describe things as a rural agricultural interface. And it's interesting that you say that in your very report, your point number 5, should the terminology of fringe be changed to rural urban interface, transition zone, et cetera? Absolutely, because the concept of fringe is something on the outside. You've got a bell curve, but you've got something on the fringe. You've got something that's unusual. And I don't think that development in this area is necessarily unusual or should be looked at as some sort of cautionary thing. I think we should be looking at celebrating great urban-rural planning. I've even seen one article talked about it, and they call it the Rurban area. Rurban. And what it is, it ain't urban and it ain't agricultural, it's rurban. And what does that mean? You know, the TNRD leads in so many different ways. We lead in Emergency Operations Center and a few other things. And I think we should be leaders in this. We should be talking about how do we create economic benefits for our rural areas and our municipal areas? What are the right kind of businesses or activities that should take place in what used to be called the fringe area that we can now celebrate? So maybe it's a film studio, or maybe it's the thing that we approved out Doug Houghton's way, where we found somebody that was supplying agricultural people with building supplies that they needed. Maybe it's a tractor supply. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we could come up with that we could excel in developing this area. Not dissimilar to things that we talk about official community plans, where we have come of age and we've said, this is the way we'd like to see ourselves in these particular areas. So I would love to see the fringe area policy. Thank you very much. Put that to bed. Let's move on to something called the Rurban policy, or a Rurban OCP, something that we can all get benefit from. And I guess I think I kind of covered my notes, but that's my strong feeling towards it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And before we go ahead, I will fight tooth and nail on Rurban. Everything else you said, I'm like, yeah, but Rurban, you lost me there, and I will fight that till my last breath.
Okay, how about bourbon?
All right. Director Newstater.
Thanks. I'll be really quick. A great discussion, fantastic discussion. I would just ask that whatever the consideration is, we don't lose sight of the idea of fee for service. It is really challenging for municipalities who do have people who need to use services. If you set something up, you have to go to your closest municipality to use an abundance of things. So whatever the adjustment looks like, I just ask that we think about that collaboratively too, to make sure that we're covering our cost bases. I'm confident that will happen and not be lost in the conversation. And then second of all, I mean, I think we should discuss Rurban over brunch, maybe. Would be a good way to go. But if we take that off the table, you know, when I was looking at it, I also think words matter. And the word fringe has really changed in its connotation right now. Fringe used to mean something in the 80s. The people don't think of immediately now. And so I think it's valuable to look at changing it, especially if that's how area directors feel about it and your residents do. I'd also just offer something as simple as what did I write down? As adjacent area policy. Like you're adjacent to a municipality, you're adjacent to, but something, you know, when I look at good neighbor, again, that has a connotation immediately that takes on like a bylaw meaning for a lot of people when you're thinking policy. So I might be resistant to that just because it's already affiliated or associated. And then something like rural urban interface, it just gets tricky to say and people don't know what it is. But something as simple as just changing it to adjacent area, I don't think that there's anything controversial in that. So just one more under quote unquote other.
Okay. I have Directors Sarai, Laird, Houghton, and Grenier. Director Sarai.
Hey, Chair, I'll keep this simple and quick. Just wondering, all the information you're taking will come back to us at another time. I'm just wondering, as a staff member, and you're dealing with us all the time, will your opinion or a recommendation, one or recommendations be coming forward to us as well? Because at the end of the day, you will be navigating what we decide in the future here.
Through the chair, yeah. I mean, I don't know where this is going to go from here in terms of next steps, because it really depends on what we're hearing now. So I'm hearing some good feedback. Will we make a recommendation? Yes. I just don't know if, I mean, so this policy is 44, 46 years old, so I can't sit here and say that we should just hang on to it. I don't think that's good planning recommendation. But the policies that are in there are still fairly strong. And I know we're talking about times have changed, yes. But we're also doing some official community plans around the Kamloops area, and we're meeting with community members. We've had 16 community meetings. nowhere are residents saying they want to see commercial and industrial in the rural area and where they're living. In fact, what we're hearing is the opposite, is the lights of the city keep getting closer and closer to us. That's what we're hearing. So can we do away with this policy? Sure. Then I'd like to at least salvage some of the strong policies into our official community plans. What I'm most worried about in terms of timing is we have the two that are at first reading now for LNP and for M&N. And we've used the F word in there, fringe, for now, because that's the policy name currently. We need to change that somehow before adoption. Then I don't have OCPs in the whole region, so we won't be covering all the small municipalities yet until we have those. So yeah, I don't even know where to go from here yet. Do we want to just amend this policy for now to make it more workable until we have OCPs everywhere and then transfer that in? Do we just do something to hold over the LNP and M&N OCP so we can get those done? I'd like to see more about where the discussion goes and what the board would like to see. I mean, it's at the will of the board. So.
And just to be clear, I'm not opposed to the word fringe. Maybe I'm by myself on this island, but it's been used for a number of years. Everybody knows what it means, and I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Director Laird.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question around the contract that TNRD has with the municipal municipalities that give them the right to vote on our TNRD planning. So City of Kamloops paying approximately $300,000 a year for the privilege of voting on planning issues in the regional district. And the municipalities are paying anywhere around, I think it's $2,000 to $3,000, depending on however they figured that out. And I think that, when did that policy come, when did we start doing it? 2017 when that came in, where the municipalities had the opportunity. Prior to that, I don't think they could vote on TNRD planning within the, I'm not sure how that follows through, but municipalities are paying now to participate in the planning. And I just need some background on why, how, if you have any idea why that started and why we're still doing that.
Yes, through the chair. So the default scheme is that all municipalities participate on the regional board for land use planning. That's the default. Then municipalities can opt out. And if they opt out, there's an opportunity to enter into a specific agreement. So since the early 1980s, the municipalities have participated and have paid into the service, but they withdrew and then entered into separate agreements to pay a, I guess, lesser share to participate. But all municipalities have participated. There was a time in the early 1980s, City Council went out for a year or two and then came back in. But it has been a consistent thing here that municipalities pay in. So back to Director Getz's comment earlier about why am I even making a comment on this as a municipal director? It's because you pay into the planning function to do regional planning. And so you have an active say on that. You're literally paying for it. And so in a way, this is where the discussion about the word came up last August, was when we were debating, when the board was debating the City of Kamloops agreement. And at the time, it was Director Houghton who had said, is it about the money that we're concerned, or is it about this relationship and this policy? And so I think that's one of our strongest attributes at the regional district, is that we have regional planning. It's not like that at every other regional district. Others are fighting terribly in terms of about everything, but certainly land use. That's always been, people have looked at us as a model. When I go to conferences, they ask me how we do it in planning. I don't want to see that go away. Whatever we can do to salvage that, please, that's the one I'd rather. The policy itself is not the hill I want to die on, but having everybody participate in regional planning is a hill that I might like to fight for, yeah.
Just have a question on that. So the agreement with the municipalities is they pay the smaller portion of our planning budget. I think the area directors pay the biggest portion. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have all the numbers in front of me. Sorry, I should have had that. But City of Kamloops pays a large portion of it, and they just increased it in the last agreement. The smaller municipalities are good until 27, there's a possibility to review, and then it rolls over for an automatic 5-year till 2032. But that can be renegotiated, rediscussed. Again, that might be a separate conversation. Is everybody paying enough? That gets heated as well because there's two sides to that. I've always looked at it as the municipalities are paying and not actually getting a service. Like, we don't provide planning support to the city of Kamloops or city of Merritt. And if they do, like in Clearwater, they're paying separately again for that service. If all the municipalities withdraw, the tax hit on the EAs is going to be significant. Like, we're trying to get taxes down every year. I've cut and trimmed the department down as much as we can. But if we change that, there's going to be a massive tax hit for the EAs. And so I think just considering that cooperation and considering that financial input, that was always kind of the give and take, is they pay in, they participate, they have a say, and they're helping to fund our department, which in turn helps the region as a whole.
Yeah, thanks. And I understand that part. I'm having a hard time having a fringe area policy and then having the separate policy where the municipalities pay. Could that not be sorted out and have it all as part of the sharing planning policy within the TNRD? Is that something that is possible? Just a question.
Through the chair, yes and no. I mean, the participation really is just a contract for that. Later, the ground rules of what we do on the ground, I feel like it should be separate from that. I know it feels clunky to have all these separate things, but one is how much you're paying to participate, and later it's the rules of engagement in your participation, if that makes sense. I feel it should be separate, but that's just my opinion.
I just have a little bit of background information on zoning that's happened in Area M and N over the years. I live at Nicola Lake. It's a 250 unit subdivision. It was probably one of the most controversial discussions that the TNRD had. It was the late 90s. They had it at the Civic Center. At the Civic Center, where there's over 500 people there for that discussion. And I think when it came back to the board, it passed by 2 votes that it be approved. And so obviously the planning session and what we're doing, it does work, but it was a 2 vote, whether it went or not. And it was, I don't know exactly why that has got into such a large discussion, but it was, it's probably one of the larger new subdivisions outside of the municipalities. The other one was one at Brookmere, which never proceeded, but that was another really close vote in a public hearing. And that only passed, I think, 1 vote passed that one, so it could be approved. So those are the things that have happened in the past as far as the area directors were supporting a large subdivision outside of the fringe area. And I don't know how if that would continue with that sort of, when a director would supporting a large subdivision that is good for not only the community, but for the whole of the area, because everybody that lives at Nicola Lake shops in Merritt. But it was such a close call where an area director was supporting and the board passed by 1 vote. And when you pass something by 1 vote, you know why you're elected, because your vote really counts when there's only 1 vote difference. So it's just the experience I've had with when there's a development that size being proposed, they're very difficult to pass, it seems. Anyway, that's just some history.
Thank you. Director Houghton.
I'll make this short. I think I'd like to see us fine tune this. I think we need a policy. I'd like to see the name changed, whatever it is. I think that's a minor thing, but I think in order for this thing to work, and I don't know what power we have besides nothing, is in order for this whole thing to work, the Agricultural Land Commission's got to be overhauled, because they're the ones that are stopping the things that could benefit the municipality happening outside the municipality because of our land freeze and our land commission. And I don't mean some great big industrial park. I mean like a shop that could be manufacturing something that would aid the municipality, but because of the land commission, they got to put up a brick wall. Is that one building going to hurt the ALR? Not in a bit. But in order for all this to work, we really got to stomp on the ALR, and I hope we get a change of government with a change of attitude in the Agricultural Land Commission, because times have changed. One of the directors said that earlier. Times have changed. We're not living in the 1980s anymore. There's pressure on that land to do fine things that would benefit both. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Couple things. I'm not an advocate for urban. So I do like the concept of moving away from the word fringe, and that it may be difficult to say, but the rural urban interface is really focusing on something better than the word fringe. The Director Newstetter talked about how the people around the municipalities are using urban system services, and that's absolutely the case. And we have had meetings with the city of Kamloops, the three surrounding areas, to talk about how that would unfold. And I think that's something that is part of this discussion about what this area looks like in between. And I would point out that Mr. Former CEO of City of Kamloops was talking about, what are you bringing to the table? Well, there's golf courses, there's access to Kamloops Lake. Savannah is having a problem with boat launch facilities because there's the city people coming out to launch their boat because there's no boat launching facility in the city that is, I guess, as convenient. There's fishing lakes that take place, and the roads are deteriorating because there's so many people going out to the fishing lakes. So there's lots that we both share together. And I think that this policy can be updated to reflect that and to build on that. Director Sow talked about it ain't so cheap to build in the rural. I can tell you that we had to build a water treatment plant, distribution system, 6.5 kilometers of roads, sidewalks, street lights, and there is no such thing as sewer in the rural other than a septic system or a full-on sewer system, which is the densification. So like Director Houghton says, we have to get the ALR issue sorted out so that properly planned communities, not just 2 acres and 5 acres and little subdivisions, but a properly planned, whatever that is, gets developed that works for the municipal people, works for the agricultural people, maintains that flavor of agriculture and open space. The rurban, the rurban idea, wrong name, but the idea that there is something that's different. It's not urban and it's not agricultural, but it sure works for us. That's the kind of thing that I'd love to see develop in an OCP. I'd like to see it or develop as a special policy that takes into consideration all of these new elements that perhaps weren't thoroughly flushed out in the 80s or weren't even an opportunity in the 80s. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, so to sum up, Mr. Kraus is telling us that the OCP is one way to address this, but that will be cumbersome, time-consuming, and difficult given the lack of OCPs throughout the TNRD. I'm also hearing that people do want to keep I'm going to refer to it as the fringe area policy for now. What I'm hearing is a sentiment on the behalf of directors that they want to keep some of the fringe area policy, that the policy itself is a sound idea, outdated in some parts, needs to be brought up to the 21st century. So I think what I'm hearing on balance is that the board would like to proceed with looking at the fringe area policy, perhaps updating, streamlining, renaming it, but keeping it as a standalone discrete thing apart from OCPs. So of course, staff is sitting here listening going, oh my goodness, okay. And staff obviously need direction from us. So anyone, what is the best way to provide the direction and the next steps forward? Bearing in mind too, and I'm just going to throw this out there, This was last August that Director Houghton first brought up the difficulties surrounding fringe area policy. We're now in April. That's 8 months. In 5 months, there's going to be an election. The chances of getting this done in 5 months, I would say, are, we have two, a fat chance and a slim chance, both which mean the same thing. I love the English language. It was about this time in the last board term that Director O'Reilly, who is not here to defend himself, came up with the idea of looking at the boundaries of the TNRD. And it was decided to leave that for the next board because it was going to be a huge project. And there were months to go in that board. So just a consideration, is this something we want to embark on now? I'm not trying to say yes or no, just pointing out reality and time. And then also, how do we direct staff to do what the direction of the board ends up being? Director Getz.
Let the EA guys do it. I'm kidding. What I'd like to see is have this policy sent to all of us. I would like my staff, my CAO and everybody else to look at it, look at what works, what doesn't. Then from merit, we make our tweaks, we send it back saying, this is what we kind of like, this is what we don't kind of like. Each group, each one of us do the same thing. And then Jamie can compile the whole thing and save the day. But just one other thing I want to point out here when we're talking about this, right now in Merritt, we've got a thing called the 286 project, which is in the fringe area. It is absolutely not really being supported. And why? Because all the taxes will go to the TNRD. The city of Merritt people are not cool about it. And that's where that line gets drawn right there. So of course it will benefit the city. There's no, and I'm a big proponent of it, and I'm selling it as much as I can. But because it's not within the city limits, people don't understand the fringe situation. They just see everything now leaving our community, and that's incorrect. But for me, right now, I can't make a decision on this because it's like 84 years old. So I would just like to see some, I'd like my staff and myself to go through it and then put my 2 cents in red and send it back with some development or with some guidance from staff. From the municipal angle, by the way.
Director Onslow, I saw your hand up.
Thank you very much. I like what you were saying, Director Getz, and I do think that we can all get this document in this term to be revitalized to what it is that we would like. And if we can send it out quickly and like get people's opinions, I think that we can all work together. And I like collaborative community zones or something like that, that would really express that we are working together and it is for the benefit of everybody. So yeah, I'd like to see us move forward with this and try to get it done in a very timely manner.
Mr. Kraus, Mr. Vieira, what would this look like?
I think it's Kraus's problem here, but sure, the issue is I have 2.5 planners. We're trying to get 2 OCPs done right now. I'm just being brutally honest. I don't know how we're going to get that done in that time frame. And my fears for the 2 OCPs that are at first reading now, I really wanted to get those done if, depending on what the public says, of course, they have an input. But it would be nice to get those done before the election, just so we can close that off and not have that become something that drags on. And I need to know what to call it in that document. So is it okay that we at least refer to it still as the fringe areas policy in that document? And then if something new comes about, then we will amend that OCP and all the OCPs and get alignment from there. That would at least let those projects go through. But between those major projects, plus a regional growth strategy monitoring report that's legally due by the end of December, plus the applications that we have, I just don't know how we can get all this done, to be honest, before the election.
Director Karpuk.
Thank you, Chair. Lots of comments back and forth and all worthy of consideration. One of the things that I did hear from Manager Kraus here earlier on is this hasn't come up as a priority issue in complaints at all. So why are we even spending the time now to deal with something, even though it's been raised? This hasn't met, in my mind, the attention grabbing and just hearing from staff on capacity. This is not an issue for this term as I see it. it's working. It's worked for 40 plus years. It may not be the most smooth, but clunky. It has achieved the outcomes for areas. Whether it's a one vote pass or not, that's the democratic process. I wasn't there for it. But it seems to be working. And to hear from staff, this is not a complaint driven need. Why are we dealing with it now? This should be down the road and dealt with when the time and the capacity is there and strategically inserted, from my perspective, into a future date where a group of people who are elected who want to sit forward, or staff input from different municipalities. I don't know how that's going to work with EAAs. We can just turn it over to our staff. We have that capacity and expertise. But that's not the fairness that it gives to the EAs. They would want to work with our planning staff, which then puts burden on them. I think this should be a down the road, let's defer to a future date issue rather than trying to figure out a way to solve it now. Just my thoughts.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Okay, so regarding the two OCPs that are coming near to completion that you would like to see done by the election, do we need anything formal in order for you to continue referring throughout to fringe area policy? Or is that simply what is going to happen? And if at some future date, the name changes to something other than Rurban, then that will be amended throughout? I mean, is it okay? Do we have to do anything for the OCPs to continue rolling along?
So no, Chair. So if I hear no direction today, then we keep steaming forward with what we've been doing. But if I'm asked to change something, that's when we're in a predicament. So, and I just don't want it where the OCPs come back for second reading and the directors say, well, wait a minute, there's 3 references to fringe in the document. That would be the only potential showstopper. So if you're okay with that, then if I get no direction today, I'm going to run away very quickly and just keep the fringe areas policy as it is, but know that it's on our docket, that in the future we have to bring this back. And by future, I mean, we'll get on it soon, but it won't be before the election. And then we can commit even for next year to make this a project, and then we can budget and plan for it accordingly.
Let our 2 OCPs go, get them done.
Before we change.
So is everyone okay with leaving it status quo right now, going off and maybe thinking about it, mulling it over, writing down some notes and coming back to it at a future date when we can budget the time, staff time and board time, and budget and funds accordingly? Everyone's okay with that? Because I don't think we need a motion for that, Director Getz. I think we can just.
I'd still just like a copy so my staff can start to look at it, because some of my council may not be there, but most my staff will be there next year. So just so they could see, if we could just get the policy sent so they can start looking at it and start to pick it apart. But I'm fine with let somebody else do it. Let this guy do it.
Director Lepso.
Yes, so thanks to Chat GPT, pretty near solved everything. But this isn't in our strategic plan. We have strategic plans for a reason. Like even with the Village of Chase, if you can refer this to us, we don't have staff time to deal with this. So I would recommend that we wait for the next elected officials and they can decide what they want to put in their strategic plan. So we have the proper resources to deal with it properly. Thank you.
So the board's will that we take no action today, we mull it over and decide what the next steps will be. All right. Okay. Run, Mr. Kraus, run. Director Sarai.
Yeah, I got to get going to another meeting with the minister, but I just want to clarify. Director Grenier mentioned that he was looking at me when he said that people are taking fish out of Kamloops Lake. I just want to clarify, I'm a catch and release guy.
Thank you for that clarification. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. A long day today, but thank you. I think we heard a lot of good information. Enjoy what is supposed to be a warm weekend. We are adjourned.